Welcome to Sally Fox audiobook. I became a hero because I couldn't quit watching anime crossovers. Chapter 1-25. Novel summary. Various anime plus multiple heroines plus fate plus loser heroine plus origairu plus Kaguya-sama, love is war plus girls band plus jiu-jitsu kaisen plus parasite plus gal plus chainsaw man plus unable to exit. This is reality, not a game. When the dimensional barrier shatters, when cursed spirits roam the streets of Shimokitazawa, when the smoke of the Holy Grail War fills the campus of Subu High School. Loie is the only player in this world. In that restaurant, he ruthlessly told that single girl, "You're completely out of luck." He once smiled at the strongest sorcerer in front of the abandoned school building and said, "Of course, why not join?" He held the stars in his hand, and stood beside him the King of Knights. He is a hero who saves the world. Luo Wei, don't misunderstand, my original intention in doing all this was really just to get enough for one temple of the entangled fate. Lo Wei, however, I don't mind eliminating some annoying things. Chapter 1 Loie, where's my exit button? Starting a new book again, it's better to be a bit more restrained. Brain storage area. Please comment, send gifts, and add to your bookshelf. The delivery arrived. Loie looked at the massive black box sitting in the middle of the living room, his eyes gleaming like a hungry wolf spotting fresh meat. For this thing, he had scrimped and saved for a full 6 months, even painfully parting with several of his favorite limited edition figures to scrape together enough for this set of so-called epoch-making top-tier equipment. Printed on the box in large gold embossed characters was Days in the Multiverse Times Deluxe Limited Edition. Finally here! My cyber wives, I'm coming for you. Loie rubbed his hands together while skillfully tearing open the packaging. Accompanied by the harsh screech of rubbing styrofoam, a streamlined, sci-fi-looking game pod was revealed. And lying quietly beside the game pod was a pair of VR glasses shimmering with a faint blue luster. This was the most advanced brain-computer interface game currently on the market, claiming to achieve a 99% full dive immersion level. The game Days in the Multiverse was further touted as an ultimate mashup masterpiece that gathered countless anime worlds, with a degree of freedom so high it was outrageous. Phew! Loie took a deep breath to calm his excitement. He first took a shower, changed into a pair of loose and comfortable pajamas, and even offered a stick of incense to Lord Guan with a great sense of ritual, praying for a good talent roll at the start. After finishing all this, Loie solemnly lay down in the game pod. The soft lining quickly adjusted to his body shape, providing an excellent sense of envelopment. He picked up the VR glasses and slowly placed them on his head. As his vision plunged into darkness, a cold electronic synthesized voice sounded in his ears. Neural connection beginning. Synchronization rate 100%. Welcome to Days in the Multiverse. A sudden sensation of weightlessness hit him. It felt as if his entire body was in free fall from 10,000 meters in the air, followed by the crushing sensation of his soul being forcibly stuffed into another shell. When Loie opened his eyes again, the dizziness had completely vanished. What met his eyes was a typical Japanese-style studio apartment. A room of less than 10 square meters, yellowing tatami mats, a low table piled with manga books and empty instant noodle cups, and the slightly dim afternoon sunlight filtering through the window. There was even a faint smell of mildew mixed with cheap air freshener floating in the air. Holy crap, this graphics quality! Loie sat up abruptly and touched the bedding beneath him in disbelief. The rough texture of the fabric, the slightly cool temperature transmitted to his fingertips, and even that inconspicuous loose thread on the quilt were all so real. He raised his hand and looked at his palm against the sunlight. His palm lines were clearly visible, and the stretching of his muscles when he made a fist felt completely natural. Is this what 99% immersion feels like? The manufacturer's technical prowess is basically black technology, isn't it? I'd believe it if someone told me I'd transmigrated. Loie jumped up from the tatami in excitement. As a hardcore veteran player, the first thing to do upon entering a game was naturally not to look at the scenery, but to check his attributes. System panel. With a thought from Loie, a semi-transparent light blue screen instantly unfolded before his eyes. The UI design was very concise, without any flashy special effects, exuding a sense of practical beauty. Player, Loey. Identity, Tokyo International Student. Age, 18. Stamina, 10. Evaluation, the theoretical limit a normal person can reach. Strength, 10. Evaluation, the theoretical limit a normal person can reach. Speed, 10. Evaluation, the theoretical limit a normal person can reach. Energy, 10. Evaluation, the theoretical limit a normal person can reach. Charisma, 10. Evaluation, Earth's answer, the peak of life. Mana, 100. Evaluation, excellent talent. Primo Gem, 0. Whoa. Loey looked at that row of neat 10s, nodded with satisfaction, and a wide grin spread across his face. Don't be fooled by the small numbers, the evaluations were the key, the theoretical limit of a normal person. What did this mean? It meant that although Loey was still a mortal, he was already at the pinnacle of mortality. He could win gold medals at the Olympics, do the work of 3 strong men at a construction site, and squeeze through a crowd of shut-ins at Akihabara to buy doujinshi. This start was simply a dream. Not bad, not bad. Although having 0 Primo Gems is a bit annoying, what more could I ask for with this initial panel? Loey paced around the small room twice and even pulled back the curtains to look at the street outside. The realistic sound of traffic and the conversations of pedestrians all told him of this world's reality. Just as he was preparing to head out and begin his Japanese harem conquest journey, a sudden thought made him stop in his tracks. Right, I should lower the pain dampening first. It wouldn't be good if I got hit by a dump truck as soon as I stepped out. Loey called up the system panel again, his finger skillfully sliding toward the settings interface. However, his finger swiped through the air, and the panel remained motionless. Who? Loey froze for a moment, thinking there was an issue with the gesture recognition. He tapped the gear icon in the top right corner that usually represented settings or exit. No response. That icon was like a static image pasted onto the screen, it remained grey no matter how much he tapped it. A premonition of doom welled up within him. Refusing to give up, Loey began tapping frantically at every corner of the panel. The top left, the bottom right, and he even tapped his character name in the middle multiple times. Nothing. There was no exit game. There was no logout. There was no logout. There wasn't even a basic call GM. The room fell into a deathly silence. The smile on Loey's face gradually stiffened as he maintained his posture with his finger suspended in midair, looking like a ridiculous statue. No way. Loey's mouth twitched, and he gave 2 dry laughs. Are you kidding me? Is this some kind of prank segment? He took a deep breath and shouted at the air, exit game. System out. Quit. Exit. Link start reverse operation. Only dust danced quietly in the air, there was no response. Loey slumped onto the tatami, holding his head in his hands, his eyes vacant. This plot, why does it seem so familiar? Is Akihiko Kayaba in a red cloak going to float down from the sky in a moment and tell all the players in that magnetic, pretentious voice, this may be a game, but it's not something to be played with? For F******'s sake. Loey's mental state collapsed. My exit button. The limited edition figure I just bought is still on the table unopened. I haven't even deleted my browser history yet. I even made an appointment with my group members to play online tomorrow. This isn't Days in the Multiverse, this is clearly an enhanced version of Sword Art Online, Unmanaged Art Online. Just as Loey was about to flip the table, the mailbox icon in the bottom right corner of his retina suddenly flashed, a bright red dot appearing exceptionally piercing. Eh? An email. P.S. The last book was a bit too wild. While this one will be more restrained, the author won't be too restrained, there will still be moments of letting myself go wild. On my other account, new book, Naruto, Many Mothers, Many Blessings, I have quite a few mothers. Chapter 2, The Impertinent Girl God. Loey froze for a moment, then, as if grasping at a life-saving straw, he quickly clicked open the mail. Could it be an official apology letter? Or a hidden quest trigger? At the very least, it should be a beginner's guide, right? The email expanded, and a line of bold, provocative black font met his eyes. Sender, God. Content. Ha 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 ha. Zarko Tilda? Did you think you were playing a game right now? You're not, though, Tilda. Zarko, you've been transmigrated, Tilda, surprised? Unexpected. How is it? The transmigration method I specifically chose for you is quite creative, isn't it? Watching you look for the quit button there was just too funny, ha 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 ha. Struggle well in this world, Zarko hero Tilda. Looking at this email, Loe's fist tightened. It was as hard as a fresh out of the oven baguette. Ignoring the content and just looking at the tone, the image of an impertinent girl with silver hair, red eyes, wearing a gothic Lolita outfit and high heels, looking down at him with disdain, instantly surfaced in Loe's mind. God? Where did BYG get this impertinent girl God from? Loe finally couldn't take it anymore and cursed at the void. If you're going to transmigrate me, just do it. It's not like I'm unwilling. I came from an orphanage anyway, with no strings attached. Sending me to a 2D world, I'd be happy before I could even react. Did you have to pull this no quit button to stunt just to scare me? And what the hell is with that Zarko? What's with the heart? Is this tone popular in the divine realm now? Are you a god who switched careers from being a doujin artist? After venting for a while, Loe collapsed onto the ground, panting. Although he really wanted to drag this so-called god out and give her a spanking, reality was right in front of him. He had indeed transmigrated. And he was thrown into this crossover anime world by a god with an extremely nasty personality. Phew. Loe rubbed his temples. As a battle-hardened keyboard warrior and veteran otaku, his adaptability was quite fast. Since he couldn't go back, he might as well make the best of it. He had physical fitness at the human limit, and plus, this was a crossover anime world. There were countless opportunities here, and those vivid characters that could only be seen on a screen. Compared to that dull and boring original world, this place might suit him better. Zarko it is then. When I become a god one day, I'll definitely let you know what insubordination means. Loe stuck up a middle finger at the air, then composed himself and closed that annoying player panel. His stomach let out a timely grumble in protest. His emotions had fluctuated too much just now, consuming a lot of energy. Loe looked out the window, the sky had completely darkened. Night had fallen over Tokyo, and the glow of distant neon lights dyed the sky an ambiguous purplish red. Since things have come to this, let's eat first. No matter which world it was, eating was always the first priority. Loe fumbled through his pockets. Fortunately, although that impertinent girl god had a nasty personality, she had provided basic starting funds. His wallet was stuffed with a stack of 10,000 yen bills, enough for him to live comfortably for a while. Pushing open the apartment door, the evening breeze mixed with the unique bustle of the city brushed against his face. Walking on the unfamiliar streets and looking at the flashing signs on both sides, the slight unease Loe felt about transmigrating completely dissipated, replaced by an indescribable excitement. This was a real 2D world. A robbery might be happening in a convenience store by the road, though there wasn't one. A girl running late with bread in her mouth might bump into him at a corner, though it was night. Looking up at the sky, he might see magical girls flying, though that was a blimp advertisement. Unknowingly, Loe arrived in front of a plain-looking beef bowl specialty shop. The sign read Gokuju Guden. The shop wasn't large, glowing with warm yellow light, and a hiring part-time notice was posted on the glass door. Let's go with this one, it smells pretty good. Loe pushed the door and entered. Welcome. The sound inside the shop was a bit noisy, it was peak dinner time, and business was quite good. Loe was about to find an empty seat when his gaze was firmly locked onto a figure near the counter. It was a blonde girl wearing a staff uniform. Although she wore a somewhat tacky baseball cap, that iconic golden bun and the singular hoge stubbornly sticking out from behind the hat instantly gave away her identity. Her skin was as white as snow, and even in a restaurant with a heavy smell of cooking oil, she appeared dignified and inviolable. Those emerald eyes were clear and focused, except the object of her focus wasn't a customer, but an extra-large beef bowl she was holding in her hands. That's... Loey's eyes widened instantly, and his heart skipped a beat. No way? The first character he meets after stepping out is this heavyweight big shot. The King of Knights? Artoria Pendragon? Working part-time in a beef bowl shop. Just as Loey was still doubting if he had seen correctly, an angry roar erupted from the kitchen, instantly drowning out the noise in the shop. Saber! You're sneaking food again. A balding, middle-aged manager rushed out with a flushed face, waving a ladle and shouting at the blonde girl. This is the 12th bowl you've snuck today. The 12th bowl? You've only been on shift for 2 hours, and you've eaten more than you've served to the customers. The girl called Saber froze, with a grain of rice even stuck to the corner of her mouth. She turned around with a serious face, swallowed the beef in her mouth, and said in an extremely solemn and formal tone. Manager, please let me explain. This is mana restoration, a necessary expenditure to maintain combat power, no, work efficiency. Furthermore, I clearly felt this bowl of beef rice calling to me just now. Calling my ass. The manager was so angry he almost had a stroke, and with a wave of his hand, you're fired. Now. Immediately. Right now. Get out. This day's wages will go toward your meal costs, though it's not nearly enough. Eh? The ahoge on Artoria's head instantly wilted, and her eye showed a deep attachment to the beef bowl, as well as despair over losing her meal ticket. Standing at the door and watching this scene, Loey couldn't help but palm his forehead. At this moment, he was certain. This was indeed that crossover anime world full of surprises and fun. That highly iconic ahoge was drooping listlessly like a water-deprived plant, following Artoria's dejected mood. Just as the manager's word "get out" landed and Artoria was about to turn and leave this place of sorrow, something eye-catching suddenly popped up on Loey's retina. It was a golden exclamation mark. It hovered abruptly above Artoria's head, swaying slightly with her movements, much like an NPC in those RPG games waiting for a hero to click on them. Chapter 3, The Fallen King of Knights. Oh? A quest already? Loey raised an eyebrow. As a top-tier player, he had a Pavlovian conditioned reflex to such visual cues. He immediately focused his mind, and with a slight thought, the golden exclamation mark transformed into lines of semi-transparent text boxes before his eyes. Trigger plot quest, The Fallen King of Knights. Quest description, Artoria Pendragon, who has wandered here, is in extreme distress. Without a master to provide magical energy, she cannot maintain her physical form through normal magical circuits and can only rely on ingesting large amounts of food to convert into magical energy. However, her wallet clearly does not support her appetite. Quest objective, please form a contract with Artoria, become her master, and inquire about what happened in the Fourth Holy Grail War. Quest rewards, Primo Gem X100, free attribute points X3. Loey stroked his chin, looking at the quest panel. The Fourth Holy Grail War? If it weren't for the butterfly effect caused by that mischievous lowly god, according to the original plot, the Fourth Holy Grail War in Urobuchi's works was an absolute meat grinder. But looking at this Saber, though she seemed a bit down and out, there was no bloody scent of fierce battle on her. Instead, she exuded a helpless, adorable aura. Moreover, the word inquire was very interesting. It implied that the Fourth Holy Grail War in this world might be different from the version Loey was familiar with. No matter what, getting Saber at the start, if I don't accept this, I'll eat this game pod right here and now. Loey took a deep breath and adjusted his expression. At this moment, Artoria had already reached the door, her hand on the doorknob, her back looking desolate and forlorn. Loey quickly walked over, calling out in a perfectly modulated tone, with 3 parts surprise, 3 parts uncertainty, and 4 parts delight. Wait! Are you Artoria? This call made the girl's movement suddenly halt. In that instant, Loie could feel the girl's previously loose aura abruptly condense, the instinct of a warrior. But soon, this vigilance dissipated. She turned around, her emerald eyes looking at Loie with a hint of disbelief. In this strange, unfamiliar world, in this cold city where even beef bowls seemed to reject her, someone actually knew her true name? You know me. Artoria's eyes widened slightly, and a hint of vivid surprise appeared on her usually serious face. For her current self, this feeling of being recognized actually brought a long-lost warmth. After all, wandering alone, without a master, without money, and enduring hunger, this sense of loneliness was truly difficult to bear. Loie didn't answer immediately but revealed an extremely sunny, utterly harmless smile. That was the worth of 10 points of charm. In Artoria's sight, the black-haired young man's smile seemed to come with a soft focus filter, and that sense of familiarity was like a long-lost comrade or the most reliable of the Knights of the Round Table. It really is you, I thought I saw wrong. Loie didn't appear overly fervent but naturally pointed to an empty table nearby. It's inconvenient to talk standing up. Since we've met, why don't we sit down and chat? Artoria hesitated, and her stomach let out a timely, though suppressed, yet clear protest. Her cheeks instantly flushed, and she awkwardly turned her head. Since you're inviting. The two sat down by the window. The restaurant was still noisy, the uncle at the next table was loudly bragging about his pachinko winnings, and the clatter of pots and pans came from the kitchen. In this place full of life, sat a night girl who looked as if she had stepped out of a painting. Loie looked at Artoria, who was sitting upright with her hands on her knees, and couldn't help but want to laugh, but he held back. He picked up the menu, pushed it generously in front of Artoria, and said with a smile, "Although this meeting is a bit abrupt, it looks like you've run into some trouble. This meal is on me. Of course, let me say up front, I'm just an ordinary exchange student, not particularly rich. I might not be able to afford a Manchuhan imperial feast, but beef bowls are all you can eat." Really? Hearing the key words "on me" and "all you can eat," Artoria's single strand of hair instantly perked up, rotating like a radar. Her eyes shone with an unprecedented light, a pure craving for food. Of course. Loie nodded. Order as much as you want. Then I won't be polite. This kindness, Artoria, will remember deeply. The King of Knights nodded solemnly, then quickly turned her head and raised her right hand high towards the manager, who was about to come over to shoo them away. The gesture was as standard as raising the sword of promised victory on a battlefield. She took a deep breath and shouted in a loud, firm voice. "Boss! 11 extra large beef bowls. With egg. With chopped green onions." The air in the restaurant was silent for a second. The manager's already dark face instantly turned liver-colored. Just as he was about to scold, Loie had already smiled, pulled a 10,000 yen bill from his wallet, and gently placed it on the table. "Serve as she ordered, keep the change." The manager's expression instantly changed from cloudy to sunny, his face changing speed comparable to Sichuan opera. He immediately put on a fawning smile. "All right. Customer, please wait. 11 beef bowls, coming right up." Loie turned his head and found Artoria looking at him, or rather, at his wallet, with an adoring gaze. Loie pointed to himself. "I need to eat too, so." "Oh, sorry," Artoria said with a serious expression. "I'll share one with you later." Loie's mouth twitched. Good heavens, so out of those 11 bowls, you plan to eat 10 yourself, huh? Soon, the waiter came with a tray, and a small mountain of beef bowls instantly piled up on the table. Artoria put her hands together, devoutly said, "I'm eating," and then began her battle. She didn't eat rudely, on the contrary, there was an elegance ingrained in her bones. But her speed was astonishing. The spoon flew up and down, her cheeks puffed out like a hamster's, and the mountain of beef bowls visibly diminished. Loie unhurriedly ate the bowl in front of him, watching the girl devour her food, and his mood was surprisingly good. Is this the joy of raising a character? By the time Artoria had finished her 5th bowl and her eating speed had slightly slowed, Loey felt the time was right. He put down his chopsticks, wiped his mouth with a tissue, and said calmly but seriously, "Artoria, though it might be presumptuous, I still want to say." Loey looked directly into her eyes and got straight to the point, "Become my servant." Chapter 4, Completing the Contract, Master and Servant. Artoria, who was busy shoveling food into her mouth, paused. She swallowed her food and looked up. Her emerald eyes were crystal clear, devoid of any impurities, and lacked the hesitation or wariness Loey had expected. She simply looked at Loey, sensing the aura emanating from the young man. To her senses, Loey's very existence was extraordinary. If an ordinary person's soul was a candle flame, then Loey, with his 10-point all-attribute rating and especially that absurd peak of life charm rating, was like a walking humanoid artifact in Artoria's eyes, or perhaps a conceptual Zlavalon. That overwhelming affinity, that subconscious urge to be close and trustful, was something that absolutely couldn't be faked. That was the first point. The second point, and the most practical one, she truly needed a master. Without a master to provide mana, she was like a sports car without fuel, forced to rely on eating to maintain her existence. She had had enough of such days. Not only was she unable to use her combat power, but she even had to rely on others' whims just to have a full meal. Yet the person before her was not only good-looking, charm check, and possessed a pure aura, good person check, but was also willing to treat her to 10 bowls of beef bowls, critical check. What was there to hesitate about? This was definitely a good person she could trust with her life. Thus, while Loey was still formulating his next persuasive argument, Artoria had already nodded vigorously, her gaze as firm as if she were taking an oath. "I agree." "Ah?" Loey was stunned for a moment. "Don't you want to think about it more? Like asking about my aptitude or something?" "No need." Artoria shook her head, picking up her 6th bowl of beef bowl. "My intuition tells me that you are someone worthy of trust. Furthermore, to extend a helping hand and even be so generous to a knight you've never met before is a sign of noble character in itself." Loey felt a bit ashamed. "Girl, I'm just after your body, and those quest rewards. Your rose-tinted glasses are a bit too thick." Regardless, the outcome was good. Amidst the aroma of beef bowls, the two happily reached a strategic cooperation that would change the landscape of the world. Half an hour later, 10 empty bowls were neatly stacked on the table. Artoria put down her spoon with satisfaction, a genuine smile of happiness, her first since arriving in this world, blooming on her face. "Thank you for the meal. I am now full of energy." "I'm glad you are full." Loey stood up to pay the bill and led his newly recruited heroic spirit out of the restaurant. It was late at night, and the streets were sparse with pedestrians. The streetlights cast long shadows of the two. "Where shall we go next, Master?" Artoria naturally switched her form of address. Although the contract hadn't been formally established yet, she had already made up her mind. Loey glanced around, thinking about the so-called sense of ceremony. Since they were forming a contract, they couldn't just slap it together on some random sidewalk, could they? That would be too undignified. "Follow me." Loey led Artoria through several streets to a quiet area. This was Hanioka Girls' Academy. Don't ask why here, the answer is that it's close by. Furthermore, the school was deserted at night. Cherry blossom trees swayed under the moonlight, and the school building was quiet and mysterious, the perfect place for a magical ritual. The two climbed over the wall, which was easier than stepping over a threshold for Loey, with his maxed-out attributes, and the heroic spirit saber. As they walked through the empty campus, Artoria didn't ask why they were there. In her view, since her master was leading the way, there must be a profound meaning behind it. Perhaps to avoid the eyes of enemies? Or to find a ley line node. In any case, following him was the right choice. Loie led her familiarly into the school building and arrived at the classroom for Class 1A. A moonlight-like water spilled through the glass windows onto the desks and chairs, gilding the entire classroom in silver. "This is the place." Loie stopped and leaned against a desk. The moonlight hit the side of his face, outlining his features with depth. He looked at Artoria and slightly raised his hand. The atmosphere was perfect. Artoria seemed to sense something as well. Her expression turned solemn, and she quickly stepped in front of Loie. At this moment, no extra words were needed. A mana link was faintly forming between the two. Although Loie didn't have magic circuits in his body, a more fundamental contract was being generated under the system's intervention. Artoria took a deep breath, her emerald eyes shining brilliantly in the moonlight. She bowed slightly, her hands gripping the air as if holding an invisible holy sword. Then she looked up, staring directly into Loie's eyes, and spoke the line etched into the DNA of countless anime fans. "I ask of you." Her voice was cool and solemn, echoing in the quiet classroom. "Are you my master?" Time seemed to freeze at this moment. Loie looked at the majestic king of knights before him. A slight curve appeared at the corner of his mouth as he reached out and gently grasped her extended hand. "Yes, I am." Voom! As those words fell, a faint but clear light flashed across the backs of their hands. Loie felt a burning sting on the back of his hand, the sign of the command seal's formation. Simultaneously, a massive and warm power surged into his body through the contract, feeding back to the girl before him. It was the sensation of the mana circuit being connected. Ding! Congratulations, player! The quest The Destitute King of Knights has been completed. Rewards distributed, Primo Gem x100, free attribute points x3. Contracted heroic spirit detected, Artoria Pendragon, Saber. Current affection, Trust. Hearing the pleasant system notification in his ear, Loie was in a great mood. It was done. There were no earth-shattering explosions or smoke rising from a summoning circle, everything had happened naturally. The contract is complete. Artoria straightened up. Feeling the mana that was no longer dry but instead surging continuously within her, she let out a comfortable breath. Her gaze toward Loie grew even softer. "My master is indeed a good person. Let's go, Saber." Loie didn't linger in the classroom. Now that the quest was complete, there was no need to stay here and feed the mosquitoes. He turned toward the door and waved his hand behind him. "The nightlife is just beginning. I'll take you to see this world." "Yes, master." Artoria followed closely behind. Although she was still wearing that somewhat out-of-place waitress uniform, her aura was completely different. The two walked out of the school gates and strolled through the late-night streets of Tokyo. Chapter 5, The Gowl in the Alleyway. The streetlights were a dim yellow, and occasionally a car returning late at night would drive by, kicking up a few fallen leaves. Loie opened his attribute panel and looked at the 3 newly acquired free attribute points. Without hesitation, he put them all into energy. High energy meant a faster recovery rate. After all, since he was raising a glutton, he couldn't do without a larger mana pool. As the attribute points were added, he felt his body become slightly lighter and his spirit more refreshed. "By the way, master." Artoria, standing beside him, suddenly spoke, breaking the silence. She looked at the flickering neon signs around them with some curiosity. "In this world, does the form of the Holy Grail war also require mutual slaughter?" "Slaughter?" Loie stopped in his tracks, looked back at the girl whose head was filled with chivalry and combat, and couldn't help but smile. "Perhaps, but before that, we have more important things to do." "More important things?" Artoria's expression turned solemn, and her hand pressed against the void. "Have you discovered an enemy?" "No." Loie pointed to a convenience store not far ahead that was still open, and the dazzling array of Haagen-Dazs advertisements in the freezer at the entrance. "Since we've finished the main course, shouldn't we consider some after-dinner dessert?" Artoria followed his finger, and her previously vigilant eyes instantly turned into stars, her throat gulping uncontrollably. "Master! I must say, your tactical arrangements truly speak to my heart." The night in Tokyo was a beast of flowing light and vibrant colors. Time quietly slipped toward 11 p.m., and the bustling commercial streets were still brightly lit. For this city that never sleeps, the nightlife had only just begun. Loie carried a plastic bag from the convenience store, containing newly bought toiletries and breakfast bread for tomorrow morning. Walking beside him, Artoria was fully focused on tackling a matcha-flavored Häagen-Dazs in her hand. She ate very seriously. Every bite seemed to be precisely calculated, her tongue curled around the cold cream, and her face showed a sense of happiness as if she were tasting a supreme delicacy. Even the ahoge on top of her head, which had been limp earlier, was now swaying happily under the neon lights, as if it were an independent biological radar. "Master, modern ice cream is truly too delicious." Artoria swallowed the last bite of the crispy shell, licked her lips with lingering desire, and her eyes were clear. The sweetness is moderate, and the texture is dense. Although it can't match the heaviness of that beef bowl, it has unique tactical value in replenishing spiritual pleasure. Loie couldn't help but smile, "As long as you like it. This will be your standard after-dinner treat from now on." "Really?" Artoria's eyes lit up, then she coughed somewhat reservedly. Although as a knight I should not covet the pleasures of the palate, since it is the master's order, I shall accept it with gratitude." The two wove through the bustling crowd. The clamor of the modern city seemed somewhat out of place with the old-style casual clothes she was wearing, which were actually casual clothes Loie had just bought for her, though they were very cheap. However, just as the two turned into a relatively secluded street, intending to take a shortcut back to the apartment, Artoria's footsteps suddenly stopped. The girl, who had been immersed in the matcha aftertaste just a second ago, had eyes that instantly became as sharp as a blade. That was an intuition that could only be honed through the battlefield. "Master, please step back." Artoria's voice deepened, and the previously relaxed atmosphere vanished instantly. She turned slightly, shielding Loie behind her, her gaze fixed intently on the dark, deep alleyway entrance not far away. "What's wrong?" Loie asked knowingly, but his hand had already quietly reached for a folding knife in his pocket. Although this thing was useless against non-human creatures, it was at least a psychological comfort. "There's the smell of blood," Artoria said in a low voice. "It's very strong, and it carries a nauseating stench of rot. It's not an ordinary beast, nor is it a normal human brawl." As her voice fell, a strange surge of magical power suddenly erupted from her. Clang! That was the crisp sound of metal clashing, not from the outside world, but originating from the manifestation of magical power. The girl, who was originally wearing a casual hoodie, was surrounded by a layer of deep blue radiance. In an instant, knight's armor interwoven with blue, white, and silver covered her entire body. Heavy bracers, a solid breastplate, and that azure battle skirt fluttering in the wind. Under the dim streetlights, at this moment, she was no longer the foodie girl who bowed for a beef bowl, but the true king of Britain. "Let's go and have a look." Loie felt no fear, instead, a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. Since this was a crossover world and he had Saber, an encounter with a low-level mob in the starting village was bound to happen sooner or later. He wanted to see exactly who this first unlucky bastard to run into them would be. The two lightened their footsteps and slowly walked into the alleyway that emitted a metallic stench. The further they went in, the more pungent the rust-like smell of blood became, mixed with the sour stench of fermenting garbage, enough to make an ordinary person vomit on the spot. At the deepest part of the alley, under a dim and flickering streetlight, a hunched figure was crouching on the ground. Gulp, squelch. The hair-raising sound of chewing echoed in the deathly silent alley, sounding like some soft tissue being torn and swallowed. By the figure's feet lay a passerby who had long since lost all signs of life, their abdomen torn open with a large hole, blood crawling across the ground like winding snakes. Seemingly sensing the presence of living people, the feeding figure abruptly stopped its movements. Or rather, he slowly turned his head. It was the face of a young man, with uncleaned remnants of flesh and blood still hanging from the corners of his mouth. But his eyes emitted a terrifying red light in the darkness, the whites of his eyes as black as ink, and the red pupils constricted violently, a characteristic known as the Chukakugan. Are you rats attracted by the scent? The thing let out a hoarse, eerie laugh and slowly stood up. Poochie! Accompanied by the sound of tearing flesh, two bright red, tentacle-like tails burst out from his lower back, dancing widely in the air, dripping with viscous fluid. Kagoon! Loe's pupils constricted slightly. As expected, it's a Gowl. He thought to himself. If it were his former self, who only had the attributes of an ordinary person, encountering this kind of monster that feeds on humans would leave no path but death. But now... Loe looked at the back in front of him, and a feeling called a sense of security welled up in his heart. Even the lowest level Gowl was fatal to an ordinary person. But in front of a heroic spirit? That was just a moving plate of sashimi. Master, that is. Artoria gripped her invisible sword tightly, her brow furrowed. Is that a human? No, that aura is completely that of a beast. That is a Gowl, a man-eating demon in human skin, an enemy of humanity. Loe's voice was cold and calm, as if pronouncing a death sentence. He did not hesitate for a moment and directly issued his first combat command since arriving in this world. Leah, go. Eliminate this monster. Chapter 6, Daily Quests. Understood. The reply was short and forceful. At the very moment that Gowl controlled his Kagoon, let out a roar, and prepared to pounce, Artoria moved. She moved like a clap of thunder. Loe felt his vision blur as a gust of wild wind rose from the ground. That was the explosive power released after Wind King Barrier was compressed to its limit. Artoria took a step forward, and the concrete ground beneath her feet instantly cracked. Her figure transformed into a bolt of silver-blue lightning, crossing a distance of over 10 meters in an instant with terrifying speed that struck before the enemy could react. The cruel sneer on the Gowl's face was still frozen on his lips, and those two Kagoon he was so proud of hadn't even had time to strike out. He only felt an irresistible, terrifying wind pressure rushing at his face, followed by a slight chilling sensation at his neck. Swish! There were no flashy moves, only a plain and simple horizontal slash. The invisible sword of promised victory sliced through the air, cut through the Kagoon, and severed the Gowl's neck. It wasn't until Artoria's figure appeared behind the Gowl and she slowly sheathed her sword that the Gowl's head slid off the incision, hitting the ground with a thud and rolling several times. The headless corpse sprayed a fountain of blood before collapsing heavily to the ground. An instant kill. Phew! Artoria let out a soft breath and deactivated her armament. Her armor dissipated into points of light, and she changed back into her casual clothes. She turned around and looked at the corpse on the ground with some disdain. So this is a Gowl? Creatures that gain power by devouring their own kind are truly unpleasant. This is one of the dark sides of this world. Loe walked forward without giving the corpse a second glance and took Artoria's wrist. Let's go. The smell of blood here will attract more troublesome things. Although we aren't afraid, we need to go back and sleep. MHM. Artoria nodded obediently. By the time they returned to the cramped 10-square-meter apartment, it was already midnight. After the little interlude just now, both were a bit tired. Of course, it was mainly Loe who was mentally exhausted. Master, I'll sleep here. Artoria pointed to an empty space next to the tatami and very consciously took out a spare set of bedding from the closet to lay out. As a servant, it is my duty to guard my master's sleep. Besides, this room really only has one bed. Loe looked at the single-sized bed and didn't put on any pretentious "you sleep on the bed, I'll sleep on the floor" the gentlemanly act. After all, he was truly tired, and with Saber's constitution, she wouldn't catch a cold from sleeping on the floor. Then I'll have to trouble you. Once I have money in the future, we'll move to a bigger house. Loe did a quick wash-up and lay straight down on the bed. This long day was finally over. From transmigrating, being mocked by a bratty goddess, picking up a wild saber, to the Gowl slaying just now. The information overload was so great that his brain was protesting. But as a veteran gamer, there was one last sacred ritual to complete before bed. System, open the panel. A light blue light screen expanded before his eyes. Lowy first glanced at his own attributes. Although the battle just now didn't level him up, Saber's stats were indeed ridiculously strong, giving him great confidence in his future survival. Next up is the main event. Lowy took a deep breath and opened the option labeled Gacha with trembling fingers. The interface instantly changed. The originally simple UI suddenly became flashy. The background was an otherworld-style blue sky with white clouds, along with several cheerful figures running around. A huge banner hung in the center of the screen. UP banner, Konosuba, God's blessing on this wonderful world. The goddess of water who is indeed a goddess but an idiot. The explosion magic user who finishes it in one shot. The masochistic pervert knight. There's even that cursed magic sword. As long as you dare to pull, these unique, problematic, companions can come to your side. Time remaining until banner ends, 29 days 23 hours. Looking at the banner cover, especially that blue-haired goddess Aqua who exuded an air of intelligence even in a static image, Lowy's mood was a bit complicated. This banner is a bit toxic. It would be fine if he pulled Megumin, one explosion magic could level Tokyo. If he pulled Aqua, his apartment might be submerged in water or seized due to debt. But regardless, this was the only way to obtain extraordinary abilities and equipment. Lowy moved his gaze to the wish button in the bottom right corner. Single wish, 160 Primo Gems. Tenfold wish, 1600 Primo Gems. Then he looked at his pitiful balance. Current Primo Gems, 100. Lowy felt a lump of old blood stuck in his throat. 160 per pull? Is this system's last name me or Ha? This is too realistic. The 100 Primo Gems he had were given for completing Saber's quest just now. This wasn't even enough for the spare change of a 10 pull, he couldn't even afford a single pull. So after I worked my life away to win over Saber just now, I'm not even worthy of a single pull. Lowy covered his face in agony. Poverty, no matter which world you are in, is the most terrifying debuff. Forget it, sleep. You can have anything in your dreams. With endless resentment toward the capitalist system, Lowy indignantly turned off the panel, pulled up the covers, and forced himself into dreamland. The next morning. Sunlight pierced through the gaps in the curtains, stubbornly stabbing into the dim room and landing right on Lowy's face. He opened his eyes groggily and habitually reached out to grab his phone, only to touch empty air. His consciousness returned. Oh right, I transmigrated. Lowy rubbed his messy hair and sat up. Instantly, that familiar light blue panel popped up automatically again. Only this time, a glaring red dot lit up on the quest column. Daily commissions refreshed. Lowy's spirits lifted. As an old player who would grind his life away for Primo Gems, daily quests were his lifeblood. That was his main source of Primo Gems. He immediately clicked on the details. Daily quests, 04. 1. Urban Scavenger, clean up Tokyo's alleys. Go to 4 specified coordinate alleys for inspection to ensure no dangerous creatures, ghouls, cursed spirits, etc. remain. Reward, Primo Gems x40. 2. Knowledge is power, go to a nearby library and engage in effective reading for more than 2 hours. Reward, Primo Gems x20, slight increase in intelligence exp 3. Run, youth, persist in running 10 kilometers. Having a strong physique is the foundation of becoming a harem king, no, a savior. Reward, Primo Gems x30, slight increase in stamina exp 4. Red string of fate, it is necessary to cultivate feelings with your servant. Please have a date with Artoria, including but not limited to dining together, walking, or training. Depending on the changes in favorability during the process, subsequent exclusive plots and CGs will be unlocked. Reward, Primo Gems X60, Random Skill X1. Chapter 7, Mission in Progress. Looking at these 4 missions, Loi's eyes gradually lit up. The first 3 were routine brick-moving missions, totaling 90 Primo Gems. But this 4th one. Isn't this the daily pre-quest for an exclusive mission? And it has the most generous rewards. It seems that while this system is a money grubber, it knows a thing or two about handling interpersonal relationships. Loi immediately threw off the covers and jumped out of bed. At this time, Artoria was still fast asleep on the floor. She was sleeping soundly, curled up in the blankets like a kitten, her blonde hair scattered across the pillow, and that Ahoge quivered with her breathing. She was probably dreaming of something delicious, as a trace of crystal-clear liquid hung from the corner of her mouth. "Hey, Leah, wake up, stop sleeping." Loi walked over without ceremony, squatted down, and reached out to poke that Ahoge. Another bowl." Artoria muttered, rolling over to continue sleeping. "Time to get up and run." Seeing that Artoria hadn't woken up, Loi intentionally raised his voice. "Time to eat, Leah." Hearing the word eat, Artoria finally struggled to open her eyes. She looked around in confusion, then at the energetic Loi, her stomach letting out a timely, thunderous growl. "Master!" Artoria sat up, clutching her flat stomach, looking at Loi with a wronged expression. Her gaze was like that of an abandoned puppy. "I'm so hungry. I want to eat. Can we eat before we run?" That was the King of Knights. And now she was actually acting spoiled for the sake of breakfast. Loi suppressed his laughter, straightened his face, and struck the pose of a strict teacher producing a star pupil. "No. Running right after eating is bad for your stomach. Besides, only after running 10 kilometers will the food taste even better. It's called bitterness before sweetness." He wagged his finger. "Do you want to eat something delicious? Do you want a big bowl of beef rice? Then come running with me." Hearing even better and beef rice, the confusion in Artoria's eyes vanished instantly. She stood up abruptly, her gaze becoming incredibly firm, as if she were about to go on a crusade against a demonic dragon. "I understand. This is Master's trial for me." Artoria raised her hands high and shouted loudly, as if praising the sun. "For the beef rice. Master is wise. Let's set off immediately. I can run even 20 kilometers. Looking at the instantly motivated Saber, Loi nodded with satisfaction. As expected, as long as you control the stomach, you control everything about the King of Knights. In the early morning of Tokyo, a hint of coolness from the night dew still lingered in the air. Most of the shops on both sides of the street hadn't opened yet, with only a few office workers hurrying along. In this somewhat desolate scenery, 2 figures were running side by side with an extremely regular rhythm. Phew, phew. Loi adjusted his breathing, sweat sliding down his cheeks. Although he possessed the peak physical fitness of 10 points in all attributes, it didn't mean he didn't need to warm up and maintain it. On the contrary, the more precise the machine, the more it needs good maintenance. Beside him, Artoria was running with extreme ease. She had changed into a tracksuit Loi had dug out last night, though the style was a bit old-fashioned, it suited her surprisingly well. Her blonde ponytail swayed behind her head with her steps, and that Ahoge stood up energetically, as if announcing to the whole world that its owner was in a good mood. Actually, it wasn't that Artoria didn't want to exercise. As a knight, self-discipline was an instinct carved into her bones. The reason she had previously always thought about how to save energy was purely because she had no food and no magical energy, so she could only minimize consumption like a hibernating squirrel. Now it was different. With Master as a continuous magical energy power bank, she felt as if she had returned to the age before she pulled out the sword in the stone, simply and happily practicing her swordsmanship. "Master, your breathing rhythm is very steady." Artoria turned her head, chatting without even changing her expression as she ran. "Though your steps are slightly heavy, your points of exertion are very scientific. It seems you've undergone systematic training before." "You could say that." Loi smiled and didn't explain much. The so-called systematic training probably referred to the survival instincts honed in that world just to move a few more bricks, as well as the muscle memory inherent in the body strengthened by the system. However, this level of exercise seems to be just a warm-up for you. Pretty much. But maintaining the habit is important. Lowy looked at the data on his wristband. All right, 10 kilometers achieved. With a crisp ding, the mission run, youth. On his retina showed as completed. Let's go, I know a very good breakfast shop ahead. Oh. It's time to show my true skills. Hearing the word breakfast, Artoria instantly sped up. Her serious nightly demeanor from discussing swordsmanship and physical fitness vanished, replaced by a golden retriever seeing a bone. In the breakfast shop. In front of Artoria sat 3 baskets of soup dumplings, 2 bowls of soy milk, and several fried dough sticks. She ate quickly, her cheeks puffing out, but miraculously, her eating manner wasn't unsightly. Instead, it had an infectious quality that stimulated the appetite. Lowy only ordered a simple sandwich and coffee, eating slowly while staring blankly out the window. A quarter of the daily missions were completed. What should I do next? This world is huge. Although it's a crossover anime world, his current range of activity is still limited to this area. According to the usual tropes, a transmigrator should start planning a grand blueprint at this time, like dominating Tokyo or becoming the kami of the new world. But Lowy looked down at his 3-digit Primo Gem savings and silently nipped those thoughts in the bud. As expected, making money is the absolute truth. Lowy sighed. After breakfast, the two began their second agenda of the day, City Scavenger. Calling it scavenging, it was actually just taking a stroll through a few dark alleys. Most of the alleys were very clean, with nothing but a few hungover drunks and stray cats. It wasn't until the third alley that a blind, low-level gal lunged out from the shadows. Before Lowy could even see what the guy looked like, Artoria beside him had already completed the full sequence of drawing her sword, slashing, and sheathing it. Small fry. The King of Knights coldly spat out 2 words, then turned to look at Lowy, her eyes instantly becoming sparkling. Master, how did I do? Nicely done. Lowy habitually patted her head. The feel was surprisingly good, and he wasn't counterattacked by that ahoge. After clearing for alleys, the mission panel ticked again, and 40 Primo Gems were credited. This money-making speed, while not fast, was at least steady. Chapter 8, The Loser, Yana Omi Anna. Next up was the third task, go to the library. Inside the Tokyo Municipal Library, it was quiet and solemn. Lowy found a corner to sit in, holding a book on the modern literary history of this world. Artoria sat opposite him, holding a richly illustrated copy of the Great Encyclopedia of World Cuisines, reading it with great relish. Lowy flipped through the pages, his expression gradually becoming a bit strange. Originally, he had held a glimmer of hope, thinking he could get rich by being a literary plagiarist. After all, in the novels he'd read before, the protagonist could achieve fame and fortune just by copying 2 poems or writing 2 novels. But reality gave him a loud slap in the face. The literary history of this world was almost identical to the world in his memory. Natsume Soseki was still writing I Am a Cat, Dazai Osamu was still writing No Longer Human, and even Haruki Murakami was still a perennial runner-up for the Nobel Prize. Aside from the occasional inclusion of strange historical backgrounds involving ghouls, demons, jiu-jitsu, or alchemy, the cultural lineage was practically a copy-paste. TSK, the literary plagiarist plan is officially bankrupt. Lowy closed the book and rubbed his temples. However, this wasn't all bad news. At least in this world, as long as one possessed power, making money wasn't a difficult task. Whether it was becoming a mercenary, a bounty hunter, or using the system's abilities to take on special commissions, it was much faster than the grueling work of writing. Master, do you seem troubled? Artoria keenly sensed the change in Lowy's mood, put down her food book, and asked with concern. It's nothing, I just found out a shortcut is blocked, and I have to take another path. Lowy waved his hand and stood up. Let's go, the 2 hours are up, task complete. The library task rewarded 20 primo gems. Adding that to his previous earnings, today's income had already surpassed 100. When they walked out of the library, it was noon. The sunlight was a bit blinding, and the number of pedestrians on the street had increased. Well then, next is the final task. Loie glanced at the pink task bar on the panel. Cultivating feelings with your servant is necessary. Although the system defined it as a date, Loie knew very well that for Artoria, there was only one best dating spot. Come on, I'll take you to get something good to eat. Yes. Master. This was a family restaurant with an American-style decor. The reason he chose this place was because he heard the burger portions were generous, and the cola was bottomless. For Loie, whose economic situation was still tight, this was the king of cost-effectiveness. The two of them found a seat by the window and sat down. Just as Loie had finished ordering and was about to discuss the profound philosophical question of whether burgers are junk food with Artoria, a suppressed argument suddenly came from the next table. Susuke, are you serious? It was a female voice with a sob. Loie subconsciously turned his head. He saw a man and a woman sitting at the next table. The man looked quite handsome, with the air of a nice guy. The girl had short blue hair and was wearing a common high school uniform. At this moment, her eyes were red as she stared at the boy opposite her. I'm sorry, Anna. The boy named Susuke had a face full of guilt, but his tone was firm. I still can't let go of Karen. I heard she's going back to England. If I don't go after her, I'm afraid I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But we clearly... The girl named Anna was somewhat incoherent, her hands tightly clutching the tablecloth. I'm sorry. The boy stood up and gave one last deep bow. Thank you for your company during this time, but I really have to go after her. After speaking, the boy ran out of the restaurant without looking back, leaving behind a decisive silhouette. The restaurant returned to its noisy state. It seemed no one noticed this small tragedy. Loie's eyebrows twitched. This plot, why does it look so familiar? Susuke? Anna? Karen? Isn't this the famous opening scene of Too Many Losing Heroines? He glanced at the seat opposite the girl. All that remained was a half-drunk glass of cola, with saliva from the boy named Susuke still on the straw. And the girl who was left behind, Yanaomi Anna, was currently staring blankly at that glass of cola. Her eyes were hollow, as if she had lost her soul. After a few seconds, she seemed to suddenly come to her senses. She sniffled, reached out, and with some trembling, picked up the glass of cola the boy had drunk from. Her movements were slow, carrying a heart-wrenching humility. Just as her lips were about to touch that straw. Ding! That familiar golden exclamation mark popped up on Loie's retina again. Only this time, it appeared above Yanaomi Anna's head, and its color was a somewhat melancholic grayish blue. Triggered side quest, redemption of the loser heroine. Quest target, Yanaomi Anna. Quest description, having witnessed the entire process of her childhood friend abandoning her to pursue true love, the girl named Yanaomi Anna is currently sinking into deep self-doubt and social withdrawal. If not intervened, she might embark on a point of no return as a professional loser heroine. Quest objective, stop her self-deprecating behavior, help her pull herself together, and make her no longer obsessed with the boy named Hakamada Susuke. Quest reward, 200 primo gems, 3 free attribute points. 200 primo gems. Loie's eyes instantly turned into the shape of primo gems. This was a huge sum. It was double the amount of those 3 daily tasks combined. And there were a full 3 attribute points. Although this task sounded a bit like the work of a kind-hearted older brother and was a bit of a hassle, what did hassle matter in the face of wicked money? Loie didn't hesitate for a second and stood up directly. At this time, Artoria was about to launch a charge on the burger that had just been served. Seeing Loie suddenly stand up, she blinked in confusion, a piece of lettuce still dangling from her mouth. Master! Wait for me a moment, I'm going to save a lost loser. Loie dropped those words and strode over to the next table in 2 steps. By now, Naomi Anna had already opened her mouth, and the straw with someone else's saliva was only 0.01 centimeters away from her lips. Slap! A slender and powerful hand appeared out of nowhere and pressed down on the cup containing the cola. Who is it? Naomi Anna was startled, snapping her head up like a frightened rabbit, tears still clinging to the corners of her eyes, as she looked at the suddenly appearing Loie with a face full of terror. Loie looked down at her, his gaze containing 3 parts pity, 3 parts helplessness, and 4 parts bitter disappointment. He didn't snatch the cup away directly, but instead spoke slowly in a highly magnetic voice that seemed to have seen through the mortal world. Young lady, even if you have fallen to the status of a loser, do not do such a sorrowful thing. Chapter 9, Naomi Anna, I don't want that. The air seemed to freeze. Naomi Anna was stunned. Her brain crashed for 2 seconds in this instant, as if processing the sheer volume of information in that sentence. Reduced to a loser? That word was like a sharp needle, accurately piercing the most fragile part of her heart. The next second, the girl exploded. She slammed the table and stood up, her small face, which had just been tearful, instantly flushing red. It was unclear whether from shame or rage. She stared at Loie and, using all her strength, let out a cry loud enough to make the entire restaurant look over. Who's a loser? I'm not a loser. The air inside the restaurant seemed to solidify for a few seconds. Afterward, Naomi Anna seemed to have all her strength drained away. She slumped into her chair, covering her flushed cheeks with both hands, making a whimpering sound like a boiling kettle. Wah! I was clearly the first one. The girl's voice filtered through her fingers, filled with endless grievance. Sukuna and I were clearly on such good terms, we were childhood friends who grew up together. Back in kindergarten, he clearly promised to marry me when we grew up, and I always thought so too. She suddenly looked up, her large, once clear eyes now brimming with tears, as she gritted her teeth and accused fate of its injustice. It's all that homewrecker's fault. She clearly just showed up halfway, so why did Sukuna choose her? Loie stood to the side, looking at this textbook example of a loser heroine. Not only did he feel no emotion, he even felt a bit like laughing. As expected, childhood friends are no match for the sudden appearance type. This is an ironclad law of the 2D world. Just then, Naomi Anna seemed to have vented enough, or perhaps that shout just now had burned too many calories. She sniffled, her gaze suddenly becoming sharp, and she waved over a server. Server! Order! Her voice carried a sort of self-abandoning heroism. I want a large cola, a double cheeseburger, and a large order of fries. With ketchup. Loie. Is this the legendary turning grief and indignation into appetite? At this time, Artoria, who had been focused on her meal at the next table, also brought her tray over and sat down. She glanced at Naomi Anna, who was fiercely attacking a burger, then at the helpless Loie. The ahoj on top of her head curved into a question mark in confusion. What happened, master? Artoria asked in a low voice, casually stuffing a French fry into her mouth. This young lady seems to have suffered some kind of severe mental trauma. Do you need me to intervene with force? No, force can't solve this kind of thing. Loie shook his head and lowered his voice, briefly summarizing the melodramatic plot of a childhood friend cruelly abandoned, boy pursues love all the way to Britain that had just unfolded. After hearing this, Artoria fell into a long silence. This red dragon of Britain, the king of knights, could be invincible on the battlefield, but dealing with such complex emotional entanglements between men and women, especially this kind of love triangle, was clearly outside her area of expertise. After all, her own romantic history in her past life was a mess. This? Artoria frowned, thinking seriously for a long time, before finally offering a not very constructive evaluation. Though I don't quite understand it, this young lady's situation is indeed sympathetic. However, since that gentleman has already made his choice, it is a knight's decision. I'm afraid it will be difficult to reverse. Lowy nodded, deeply agreeing. He turned around and looked at Yang Amy Anna, who was weeping while taking large bites of her burger. For those 200 primo gems, and for those 3 attribute points, he had to apply some strong medicine. And so, Lowy cleared his throat, his expression instantly becoming incredibly serious, like a commander reviewing his soldiers. "Corporal Yang Amy." This sudden, sharp shout caused Yang Amy Anna, who was swallowing her burger, to stiffen. Almost like a reflex, she snapped her back straight, breadcrumbs still stuck to the corner of her mouth, and shouted loudly, "Here!" Only after shouting did she realize what she had done, looking at Lowy with a face full of confusion. Lowy didn't give her time to react. Instead, he leaned forward with his hands on the table, his deep eyes staring intently at her, and spoke in a tone of almost cruel, calm logic. "Listen, Yang Amy. I know this is hard to accept, but as an observer, I have a duty to tell you the truth. The truth." Yang Amy Anna was still holding half a French fry, looking a bit dazed. "Exactly." Lowy held up a finger and wagged it in front of her. "That boy named Hakamada Susuke, since he's already chased her to the airport and is even going to Britain, do you know what that means in the script of the 2D world? No, in this world." Yang Amy Anna subconsciously shook her head. "It means..." Lowy took a deep breath and ruthlessly pronounced the verdict, "You're completely out of the game." The plot after this kind of pursuing the wife to the crematorium usually involves the two of them resolving their misunderstandings in a foreign land, their feelings heating up, and finally walking straight into the hall of marriage, even having their children's names picked out. This is the so-called the happy end for them, of course. The fry in Yang Amy Anna's hand dropped onto the table. In other words, Lowy continued to twist the knife, "You've gone from a substitute player to extra A. There's no longer a place for you in their story." Silence. A deathly silence. A few seconds later, Yang Amy Anna finally understood the meaning behind Lowy's words. "I don't want that." The girl suddenly grabbed her head and let out a shrill wail, her entire body twisting like the famous painting The Scream. "I don't want that. Susuke being with another woman, at least wait until after I find a boyfriend. Let him keep thinking about me, even for 10 years. Lowy's mouth twitched. Good grief, these lines. "Are you possessed by Iron Jaeger?" But seeing her cry with such genuine emotion, Lowy didn't stop. He spread his hands and continued his output. "While it's a pity, that's the reality. No matter how many burgers you eat or how many colas you drink here, reality won't change." Yang Amy Anna looked up, her face covered in tears and ketchup, looking both ridiculous and pitiful. She sobbed, looking at Lowy with a gaze as if she were clutching at the last straw, asking cautiously, Do I really have absolutely no chance left? Even a little bit." Lowy looked into her eyes and, without any hesitation, gave a heavy nod. "Yes. Not even a 1 in 10,000 chance. Right now, you are a complete and total loser." Chapter 10, The Toyokawa Family's 16.8 billion. "I don't believe it." "Wah." Naomi Anna clutched her head and wailed again. This time, she was truly in despair. The childhood friend she thought would always be by her side, the boy who once made a promise, had really left for good. Half an hour later. Having cried herself out and eaten her fill, Naomi Anna finally calmed down a bit. Although her eyes were as swollen as walnuts, her emotions had at least stabilized. Anyway, thank you for listening to my grumbling." Naomi Anna sniffled and stood up somewhat sheepishly, preparing to go to the front desk to pay the bill. However, after rummaging through her pockets for a long time and only pulling out a few coins and a crumpled coupon, her face instantly turned pale. In her earlier state of grief and indignation, she hadn't calculated her small savings at all. And her wallet was clearly not prepared for this. That. Naomi Anna turned around, looking at Lowy with an embarrassed expression, her fingers twisting uneasily. Could you?" Lowy sighed. He knew it would end up like this. "Forget it, I'll do it." Loie took out his wallet and walked toward the cashier under Yana Anna's tearfully grateful gaze. Although he was poor too, this money counted as necessary emission funds. And seeing Yana Anna's "I'm saved" expression, the investment was clearly worth it. Consider this money alone. Loie finished the payment, took the receipt, and waved his phone. Let's add each other online. Remember to pay me back later. Yes. I'll definitely pay you back. Thank you so much. As if granted a grand pardon, Yana Anna hurriedly took out her phone and exchanged contact info with Loie. Looking at the Yana Anna in his contacts, whose profile picture was a blue otter eating meat, Loie nodded with satisfaction. This counted as a connection, even if it was a loser connection. After saying goodbye to Yana Anna, Loie and Arturia returned to the street. The midday sun was just right. To appease Saber, who had been slightly neglected earlier, Loie specifically went to a nearby convenience store to buy a limited edition sea salt ice cream and handed it to her. Here, dessert. Thank you, master. Arturia took the ice cream, the gloom from watching someone cry earlier instantly vanishing, replaced by a healing smile. The two strolled down the street, enjoying a rare moment of leisure. Loie looked at the King of Knights beside him, who was focused on her ice cream, and finally asked the question on his mind. By the way, Leah. About the previous Holy Grail war, what exactly happened? Normally, you should have had a master. Hearing this, Arturia's action of licking the ice cream paused slightly. She looked up, a look of reminiscence flashing in her emerald eyes. Actually, I'm not very clear on the specific details myself. She took a small bite of the cone and organized her thoughts. At that time, I heard the call of the Holy Grail at the Hill of Camlan. The sensation was intense, like being forcibly pulled by some power. But when I opened my eyes again, I didn't see a summoning circle, nor did I see the master I expected. No master. Loie raised an eyebrow. Yes. I just appeared abruptly in some corner of this world. Arturia shook her head, her expression somewhat solemn. No mana supply, no restraint from command spells, I couldn't even sense the aura of the Holy Grail. I was like a lost person wandering in this strange world. Until I met you, master. She turned to look at Loie, a hint of relief in her eyes. Though I don't know what happened, maintaining my existence is very important to me. If I hadn't met you, I'm afraid I would still be worrying about food. Loie nodded thoughtfully. It seemed the crossover nature of this world was even more thorough than he had imagined. The so-called Fourth Holy Grail war likely had some sort of bug or was affected by some irresistible force due to the merging of worlds, causing deviations in the heroic spirit's descent. That old schemer Emir Kiritsugu might not have been able to summon Saber at all, or perhaps he summoned something else. Anyway, it's good that you survived. Loie smiled. The mission now is simple: eat well, live well, and occasionally help me slay a few monsters. Yes, master. In the afternoon, Loie didn't choose to go back to his apartment to slack off. Instead, he took Arturia to a place full of artistic atmosphere, Shimokitazawa. This is the subculture center of Tokyo and a sanctuary for countless young men and women harboring musical dreams. The streets are lined with various vintage shops, record stores, and live houses of all sizes. The air was thick with the aroma of coffee and the faint roar of a bass guitar. For Arturia, everything here was full of novelty. Like a curious child, she looked at the exaggeratedly shaped guitars in the shop windows and the young people dressed in eccentric clothes. Just as the two were passing the entrance of a live house named Histari, Loie's pace slowed down. Two rather conspicuous figures were standing at the entrance. One was a cool beauty with long blonde hair and a large ribbon tied on top of her head, arms crossed, looking at her phone impatiently. The other was a girl who looked like a middle school student with a yellow side ponytail, full of energy, carrying a drum bag and gesturing excitedly. Ijichi Seika, and Ijichi Nijika, who had just started her first year of high school. Loie's gaze lingered on the two for a moment, but his thoughts didn't stay on the future Tikesaku band. Seeing these two, Especially feeling the thick Band-Aid atmosphere, another matter suddenly came to mind. Or rather, a huge sum of money. If the timeline was correct, Toyokawa Kiyosugu hadn't been forced to lose 16.8 billion yet. Could he get a piece of the action? That was a full 16.8 billion yen. Lowy stroked his chin, a glint called greed flashing in his eyes. Although he was currently a pauper with only a few hundred primo gems, that didn't stop him from having some bold ideas. The key is the timing. Lowy calculated in his mind, has Toyokawa Kiyosugu been kicked out of the Toyokawa family by Toyokawa Sadaharu? If not, then the 16.8 billion fraud hasn't happened yet. If that money was still in play, as a messenger of justice with a system, was it possible for him to intercept it? Since the money was going to be scammed away anyway, he couldn't just let some dog conglomerate profit from it. Stealing from thieves? No. Robbing the rich to help the poor? I have absolutely no psychological burden. Chapter 11, Conversation Amidst the Stars. A mischievous smirk played on Lowy's lips. Anyway, according to the original plot, this money would eventually vanish amidst various chaos or be absorbed internally by the Toyokawa family. Rather than that, it was better for him, a hero in dire need of primo gems, to save the world, to keep it safe. Looks like I need to do some investigating. Lowy formulated his next plan in his mind. As long as I find out the current status of that band called Cricket and whether they've disbanded, I can deduce Toyokawa Kiyosugu's current situation. As long as that supergravity band was still active, it meant the gold mine was still there. Master? What are you laughing at? Artoria, standing beside him, couldn't help but shiver as she watched the smile on Lowy's face gradually turn perverted. I don't know what you're thinking, but I feel like someone is about to have a very bad day. Whom? It's nothing. Lowy instantly wiped the smile from his face and returned to a serious expression. I was just thinking about what to eat tonight. Beef bowl. In the afternoon at Shimokitazawa, the air was thick with the elements of youth and restlessness. A small-scale performance was taking place inside the live house Starry. Although the band on stage wasn't the legendary Akeseku band yet, the slightly unpolished but passionate waves of sound still made people involuntarily sway to the rhythm. Lowy and Artoria stood at the back of the crowd. Compared to Lowy's comfort in this atmosphere, Artoria seemed a bit stiff. She had her arms crossed, and while her eyes were fixed on the guitarist frantically strumming on stage, the ahoge on top of her head swayed with an extremely regular frequency, as if she were trying hard to analyze this never-before-seen sonic attack. How does it feel? Lowy turned his head and raised his voice slightly in the noisy environment. Aside from the beef bowl. Artoria thought seriously for a moment and gave a very fair answer. It is a bit noisy, but full of vitality. This method of using sound to convey emotion shares commonalities with the sound of a bugle on the battlefield. However, if I am to be honest. She paused, a glimmer of anticipation flashing in her eyes. Rather than listening to another song, I would much prefer another one of those things called sea salt ice cream. Lowy couldn't help but laugh. It seemed there was still a long way to go to turn the King of Knights into a rock girl. Leah, are you interested in joining a band? Lowy asked half-jokingly. I think you have a lot of talent for being a drummer. After all, your sense of rhythm when eating is excellent. A band. Artoria imagined herself holding drumsticks and striking away frantically, then decisively shook her head. Her ahoge swayed in a firm arc along with her. No, master. As a knight, the sword in my hand is swung for the sake of protection. If it were used to strike a musical instrument, I feel it would be somewhat improper. Besides, I am not well versed in melody. I fear I would not be up to the task. Fair enough. Lowy nodded. After all, your hands are meant for holding swords and chopsticks. The two stayed at Starry for a while longer, finished listening to the final encore, and then turned to leave the boisterous place. Stepping out of the basement, the sky outside had already been dyed with a layer of dusky yellow. The setting sun stretched their shadows very long. The number of pedestrians on the street gradually increased, mostly students returning from school and corporate workers preparing to relax at an izakaya. Loey walked in front, looking at the brilliant sunset glow on the horizon, but his mind was calculating something else. Even though he had a system and saber, his own strength was still a weakness. Having 10 points in all attributes only brought him to the human limit, but in this crossover world where monsters and ghosts ran rampant, this level of power made him a slightly stronger grunt at best. If he didn't improve himself quickly, in case he encountered a stronger gal next time or something else, it would be too embarrassing for him as a transmigrator to just rely on saber to stand in front of him. Moreover, he also wanted to know exactly where the limits of this body lay. Thinking of this, Loey stopped his pace and turned around to look at the girl behind him. The afterglow of the setting sun spilled over her face, plating her in a golden silhouette. Those emerald eyes appeared exceptionally clear in the twilight. Leah. Yes, master. Artoria stopped immediately and looked at him seriously. While I know how to make my physical body stronger, I don't understand things like technique. Loey looked into her eyes and said sincerely, so, could you teach me swordsmanship? I want to learn combat techniques from you. Hearing this request, Artoria was stunned for a moment. Then, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing a smile that was both gratified and somewhat stern. It was the specific expression of a mentor seeing a motivated student. Of course, master. Artoria nodded, her tone carrying an unquestionable majesty. Since you have this determination to become stronger, as your servant, I will naturally teach you everything I know. However, her tone shifted, and her gaze became somewhat sharp. My training is very strict. Back in Camelot, even the Knights of the Round Table would find it difficult when facing my instructional battles. It will not be easy. No problem. Loey clenched his fist. I will work hard so that I can fight alongside you. Very well. Artoria nodded with satisfaction. Then starting from tomorrow morning, the time after our run will be used for basic swordsmanship training. After finishing their day's date itinerary, it was completely dark by the time the two returned to the small rental room. As he took the final step through the door, the pleasant golden prompt box popped up on Loey's retina again. Ding! Daily commission, for fourths, completed. Rewards obtained, Primo Gem X20, free attribute point X1. Adding in the previous rewards for cleaning the alley, reading, running, and comforting the loser, Loey did a quick calculation of today's gains. A total of 170 Primo Gems had been earned, which was just enough for a single pull with some to spare. 1 free attribute point. Most importantly, it was the random skill he had obtained from the daily missions. What a harvest! Loey sat on the bed in a great mood. Compared to that scammy gacha pull, this random skill was clearly what he looked forward to more. After all, this was a solid ability that didn't require luck. Well, while the skill itself was random, it was still better than pulling a useless dagger. System, draw the random skill. Loey took a deep breath and made a mental command. The wheel on the panel began to spin rapidly, with countless icons flashing before his eyes. A few seconds later, the pointer slowly stopped, landing on a strange icon depicting a palm. Congratulations on obtaining the skill, Steel Active. Chapter 12, Artoria's an Artifact. Skill, Steel. Skill description, a signature skill originating from a certain reincarnator from another world. By consuming a small amount of mana, one can randomly steal an item from the target. The success rate of the theft is related to the difference in luck between the user and the target. Note, although this skill appears perverted, it is unexpectedly useful at times. Steal. Loey's eyes widened, and he nearly choked on his breath. This is the so-called random skill? Isn't this the famous ultimate move of the degenerate Kazuma? Soto Kazuma? In the face of this skill, any magic or swordsmanship is weak. This is a divine technique reputed to cause countless countless disputes. Loey looked at the skill icon with mixed feelings. On one hand, this skill was indeed a bit indecent, but on the other hand, as a pragmatist, he couldn't help but want to test its actual effects. What if he could steal an enemy's weapon or a key item? Wouldn't that be a god-tier skill in battle? To verify this hypothesis, Lowy turned his gaze toward Artoria, who was currently tidying the bedding. Ahoom, Leah! Lowy cleared his throat, trying his best to look like a mage conducting serious academic research. Does Master have any instructions? Artoria stopped what she was doing and turned around. Well, I just acquired a new skill and want to test its effect. Lowy kept his tone as serious as possible. You know, understanding the boundaries of one's own abilities is very important for combat. Artoria didn't think much of it and nodded. I see. Since it is Master's new power, testing is indeed necessary. She stood up straight and assumed a defensive stance, her eyes determined. Come, Master. Although I am not wearing armor right now, I will take your move. No, it's not an offensive skill. Lowy waved his hands hurriedly, afraid this straightforward King of Knights would blast him away with mana burst. This skill is called Cloud Plucking Hand, which is to say, steal. I want to see if I can take something from your hand. Steal. Artoria was stunned for a moment, seemingly surprised by the name of the skill, but she still nodded. Understood. Is it a technique similar to disarm? Something like that. Lowy rubbed his nose guiltily. How about this, hold some pebbles or the coins left over from the change earlier in your hand. Hold them tight. I'll try to see if I can take them from a distance. All right. Artoria was very cooperative. She fished a 100 yen coin out of her pocket, gripped it tightly in her palm, and then extended her hand toward Lowy with a serious expression. I am ready, Master. Please begin. I will use all my grip strength to resist. Looking at the righteous and awe-inspiring Artoria, Lowy suddenly felt a pang of guilt. But soon, this pang of guilt was suppressed by curiosity. I'm doing this to test the skill mechanics. I'm doing this to fight better in the future. Lowy chanted this 3 times in his head, then extended his right hand and aimed it at Artoria. Steal! With a low shout, a faint white light flickered on Lowy's palm. The next second, a strange sensation spread through his body, as if an invisible thread had connected to something. Suddenly, something extra appeared in his hand, soft, and carrying a warm body temperature. It wasn't the cold, hard touch of a coin. Did it succeed? Lowy was overjoyed and looked down at his palm. Opposite him, Artoria, who had been serious, suddenly stiffened. She subconsciously clamped her legs together, a very strange expression appearing on her face that had never been seen before. That feeling, it was like it had suddenly become empty and chilly under her skirt. This is... Lowy looked at the spoils in his hand, his mind going blank instantly. It wasn't a coin. It was a piece of white fabric. To be precise, it was a pair of very simple-styled cotton artifacts, carrying a faint fragrance. Is this the legendary artifact? The air completely froze at this moment. Lowy looked at the artifact in his hand, then looked up at Artoria, whose face was flushed red from the base of her neck to behind her ears. Leah, if I say this was the skill's automatic judgment. Lowy swallowed hard, trying to explain this suffocating misunderstanding. It seems to prioritize stealing the most valuable, no, the most intimate item. Artoria stared intently at the white object in Lowy's hand. Those emerald eyes no longer held the calm of a knight, instead, they were filled with shame, shock, and a hint of impending murderous intent. Mars, wait! Don't draw your sword. This was force majeure. I'll give it back to you. I'll give it back. Lowy scrambled to hand the artifact back. He really didn't expect that he would perfectly inherit Kazuma's luck god constitution, hitting such a jackpot on the very first try. Are you a pervert? That was the last thing Lowy heard that night. Immediately following was a simple but powerful straight punch. Bang! 10 minutes later. Lowy clutched his swollen left eye and lay honestly on the bed. Artoria had her back to him, huddled in the corner wrapped in a quilt. Even with only the back of her head showing, one could feel a continuous stream of resentment. "Hey! Leah?" Lowy called out tentatively. "HMPH." He was met with a cold snort, and the back of her head retreated further toward the wall. Lowy sighed and looked at the ceiling, his heart full of grievance. Heaven knows, he really wasn't that kind of person. The degenerate one wasn't him, it was this damn skill. Who knew this crappy skill's judgment was so ridiculous, ignoring the coin in her hand and insisting on stealing that kind of thing? I'd better use this skill sparingly in the future. Lowy swore secretly. If this were used on a male enemy it would be fine, but if it were used on some final boss, the scene would be unimaginable. Cough, it's getting late, let's sleep early. Lowy rolled over, trying to make his voice sound full of repentance. We have to get up early to practice swordsmanship tomorrow. There was a long silence. Just as Lowy thought he wouldn't get another response tonight, a muffled voice came from the corner. "Good night, Master." Although there was still a bit of lingering shame and annoyance in her tone, at least she was willing to speak. "Good night, Leah." Lowy breathed a sigh of relief and closed his eyes. Even though he took a punch, he had to admit. In a certain conceptual sense, this skill was indeed ridiculously strong. Chapter 13, Artoria's Teaching. The morning sunlight filtered through the gaps in the curtains, stubbornly piercing into the room and casting streaks of light onto the floor. Lowy opened his eyes and sat up from the bed. Although that awkward Holy Relic incident had occurred last night, making the atmosphere a bit subtle when the two said goodnight, life had to go on as a new day arrived. Especially for the current Lowy, every day was a critical period for becoming stronger. After finishing his morning routine, Lowy glanced at the refreshed daily quest panel. Compared to yesterday's newbie guide-style tasks, today's list was clearly more targeted and challenging. Daily quest list. 1. The flesh is weak, complete a 10-kilometer weighted run, 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and 100 squats. Reward, 40 Primo Gems. 2. Skill refinement, follow Artoria for over 2 hours of basic swordsmanship training. Reward, 50 Primo Gems. 3. Knowledge is power, read and understand a book about supernatural abilities or jiu-jitsu. Reward, 40 Primo Gems. 4. Exorcise curses, head to the abandoned school building of Sujisawa Third High School and clear the cursed spirits lurking within. Execution at night is recommended. Reward, 50 Primo Gems. Perfect attendance reward, 20 Primo Gems, 1 free attribute point. A total of 200 Primo Gems, plus 1 attribute point. Lowy calculated in his mind while brushing his teeth, although the workload has increased, the rewards have also grown. Especially that curse-clearing task, I feel like something's going to happen. However, task for explicitly recommended night execution, which meant he had plenty of time during the day to handle the first 3 tasks. Half an hour later, at a nearby park. After finishing their morning run, the two arrived at a secluded clearing in the woods. Lowy held 2 relatively straight branches he had picked up from the roadside last night and handed one to Artoria. "Then, I'll be in your care, Teacher Leah." Lowy took a deep breath, his expression solemn. The moment she took the branch, Artoria's aura changed. If before she was the girl next door who would get depressed over missing out on delicious food or feel ashamed and angry over stolen undergarments, then at this moment, the person standing before Lowy was King Arthur, who commanded the Knights of the Round Table and fought on battlefields. Holding the sword with one hand, her posture was as upright as a pine tree. Her emerald eyes no longer held a trace of warmth, leaving only a sharpness that seemed capable of piercing through everything. "Listen well, Master." Artoria's voice was cold and serious. "Swordsmanship is not just for show, it is a technique for killing and a means of protection. On the battlefield, any redundant movement can lead to death. Since you wish for me to teach you, I will not hold back. That's exactly what I want. Lowy gripped the branch and assumed what he thought was a standard starting stance. Your posture is too stiff. Artoria didn't even move, she simply pointed it out coldly. Relax your shoulders and lower your center of gravity. As you are now, you'll fall with just a light push. Lowy hurriedly adjusted. Don't lift your heels too high, that's a posture for running away, not for attacking. When swinging the sword, don't just use the strength of your arms. Use your waist, your spine, and concentrate the strength of your entire body into a single point. The next 2 hours were hellish torture for Lowy. Artoria didn't use any magical energy, nor did she even move her feet much. Using only that fragile branch, she precisely struck Lowy's wrists, knees, shoulders, and other joints time and again. Asterisk smack, asterisk. Too slow. At this speed, you couldn't even hit a slime. Asterisk smack, asterisk. Don't let your eyes wander. Stare at the tip of my sword. Predict my movements. Asterisk smack, asterisk. Wrong again. Do it again. Sweat soaked Lowy's clothes. His arms were so sore he could barely lift them, and several red welts had appeared on his body. Yet he didn't call for a stop, nor did he even let out a single groan of pain. Because he could feel that under Artoria's near-harsh guidance, his originally chaotic sword swings were gradually becoming standardized, and his body's power delivery was becoming more scientific. This was true combat swordsmanship, experience distilled from countless life-and-death struggles. Not until the sun was high in the sky did Artoria put away the branch. That overbearing aura vanished instantly, and she returned to being that obedient servant. Good work, master. She stepped forward, looking at the panting Lowy, a hint of approval flashing in her eyes. Your comprehension is better than I imagined, and your perseverance is commendable. Phew. Thanks for the compliment. Lowy wiped the sweat from his face. Though he was as tired as a dog, he felt very fulfilled. Task 2, Skill Refinement, completed. After a simple midday break and lunch, Lowy flipped through a copy of folk jiu-jitsu ghost stories he had scavenged from an old bookstore, successfully completing Task 3. At this time, it was just past 2 in the afternoon. There was still a long time before the night's exorcism mission. Lowy sat on the sofa, looking at the bright sunlight outside the window, his fingers lightly tapping on the table. Since he was free anyway, he might as well advance that side quest. After all, it was Naomi Anna's exclusive quest, and the rewards were quite generous. Thinking of this, Lowy took out his phone, opened Line, found the contact with a foodie otter avatar, and sent a message. Lowy, are you free? Let's come out and chat. The other side replied almost instantly. Naomi Anna, crying emoji, I'm currently troubled. Where's the location? The agreed meeting place was a nearby outdoor cafe. When Lowy arrived with Artoria, Naomi Anna was already sitting there. Having not seen her for just a day, this loser heroine seemed to have become even more haggard. An iced coffee that had already half melted sat before her. She looked like a dehydrated slime, slumped over the table, radiating a thick aura of gloom. Lowy. Seeing Lowy sit down, Naomi Anna looked up, her pretty face practically screaming the words life is meaningless. What should I do? What's wrong? Lowy asked knowingly, gesturing to a waiter to order a strawberry sundae for Artoria. It's Susuke and Karen. At the mention of these two names, Naomi Anna's expression became even more pained. She grabbed her hair and let out a wail. They actually asked me to go to karaoke tonight. Lowy raised an eyebrow. This was indeed hellish. A former childhood friend and his current girlfriend inviting the recently heartbroken loser childhood friend to go singing? This wasn't just adding insult to injury, it was practically luring the dog in just to slaughter it. I don't want to go. Naomi Anna wailed. Watching them sweetly sing love songs together while I'm just responsible for shaking the tambourine and skipping songs. Just thinking about that scene makes me suffocate. Then just refuse. Chapter 14, Methods of Repayment. Loie said as a matter of course, for this kind of nutrient-free gathering that only serves to block your own heart, wouldn't it be easier to just not go? But I already agreed. Naomi Anna buried her head in the crook of her arm, her voice muffled. At the time, Susuke sent a message asking if I was free. My brain just twitched and I replied a yes, and then he took the opportunity to invite me. By the time I realized what was happening, I had already agreed. Loie looked at her, speechless. Is this the legendary reflex-type simp? Since you've agreed, then just bite the bullet and go. Loie spread his hands helplessly. However, since you're going, you must act like you don't care at all. Keep a smile on your face the whole time, play with your phone occasionally, and show a sense of magnanimity like I'm just here for the fun, I don't care about the two of you at all. Otherwise, if you have a long face in the karaoke box, it would be far too ugly. I can't do it. I absolutely can't do it. Naomi Anna suddenly looked up, tears in the corners of her eyes. Whenever I see Susuke smile at Karen, my heart hurts like it's being pricked by needles. Not to mention having to listen to them sing love songs. I'm afraid I won't be able to stop myself from crying on the spot, or throwing the microphone at the TV screen. Loie sighed. It seemed unrealistic to expect this loser to have any high EQ maneuvers. Then just refuse after all. Loie gave the final plan. Although backing out now might make you look like a flake, it's better than going to the scene to be tortured. One shouldn't wrong themselves too much, especially in matters like this. But what reason should I use? Naomi Anna had a conflicted look. They all know I'm in the go-home club, I usually don't have any club activities, and I don't have any other hobbies. If I say I'm sick, Susuke will definitely worry and run over to see me. It'll be even more embarrassing when the lie is exposed. There are plenty of reasons. Loie rubbed his chin and began to help her strategize. Just say you have to accompany your boyfriend and don't have time to play house with them. Be boyfriend. Naomi Anna's eyes widened, and she pointed at herself. Where would I get a boyfriend? If I had a boyfriend, would I be here crying like a fool? She said this with such righteous conviction that even Loie fell silent for a second. How tragic. Truly worthy of the titled Queen of Losers. Looking at the girl before him, who was quite cute but radiated the aura of a loser from head to toe, Loie glanced at the tempting rewards on his mission panel. Fine, for the primo gems and attribute points, sacrificing a bit of his charm wasn't out of the question. In that case. Loie sighed and pointed to himself. Then, I shall play the role of your boyfriend. Eh? Naomi Anna was stunned. A fake one, of course. Loie immediately added, a hint of disdain in his tone. After all, I have no interest in dating someone who owes me money they haven't repaid and has such a boisterous way of eating. Who? Naomi Anna, who had looked grateful just a moment ago, instantly bristled. She pointed at Loie and then at herself in disbelief, saying huffily, Hey! What do you mean by that? I'm very popular, okay? People have written me love letters at school. I'm considered a beautiful girl too. Why do you make it sound like I'm so terrible? Loie didn't speak, he just silently turned his body aside, revealing Artoria sitting next to him, elegantly eating a strawberry sundae. In the sunlight, the golden-haired king of knights was quiet and beautiful. Although there was a bit of cream near her mouth, her dignified aura and exquisite features made her look like she had stepped out of a painting. Naomi Anna followed Loie's gaze. She looked at Artoria, then looked down at herself. After 3 seconds of silence, Naomi Anna, who had been like a fighting cock, silently lowered her head and deflated like a punctured balloon. I'm sorry, I overstepped. She really couldn't compare. Whether it was looks, temperament, or that mysterious sense of pressure, they were completely on different dimensions. As long as you know. Loie smiled. All right, enough nonsense. Send me the specific time and place. Tonight, I'll show you what dignity truly means. In the afternoon cafe, the sunlight was just right. After receiving Loe's promise of fake boyfriend support, Naomi Anna seemed to have regained her confidence as a beautiful girl. She stole a glance at Loe. She had to admit, although this guy had a bit of a sharp tongue and a nasty personality, there was nothing to complain about regarding his face. One could even say he was a bit excessively handsome. That aura, a bit lazy, a bit mysterious, with a slightly wicked smile, made him look like an incubus-type protagonist from a shoujo manga. If she had such a boyfriend by her side, even if he was fake, it would be enough to hold her head high in front of Hakamada Susuke. Thinking of this, Naomi Anna's mood improved just a little bit. But immediately following that, another more severe problem surfaced in her mind. It was a realistic, money-scented worry. Naomi Anna had only been excited for 2 seconds before she suddenly remembered something, and her originally straight back slumped again. She rubbed her fingers together sheepishly, her voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz. I'm sorry, Mr. Loe. Although I'm very grateful you're willing to help, but what is it? Loe raised an eyebrow, looking at her fidgety manner. I really don't have any money on me right now. Naomi Anna's face turned red, and her head almost drooped to her chest. Whether it's the previous meal money or the performance fee for your appearance this time, can you give me a little more time? Saying this, she seemed afraid Loe would back out and quickly looked up, promising with sincere eyes. Next month. As soon as I get my allowance next month, I'll definitely pay you back immediately. Really? I can guarantee it with my character. Looking at the girl's expression, which was like an elementary student who had done something wrong, Loe didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy. Instead, he became even more determined to tie her completely to his chariot. Guarantee with her character? For a loser, is such a thing really worth anything? Loe's fingers lightly tapped the tabletop. He didn't answer immediately but instead looked Naomi Anna up and down with the scrutinizing gaze of one inspecting merchandise. He waited until she felt uneasy before slowly speaking. When it comes to debt, interest accumulates if it's dragged out for too long. Hey! There's interest too. Naomi Anna cried out. However? Loe changed the subject, a meaningful smile curling at the corner of his mouth. I'm not the kind of unreasonable loan shark. Since you can't produce the money right now, then use labor to pay off the debt. Labor. Chapter 15, Naomi Anna, that's not how it's supposed to be. Naomi Anna subconsciously clutched her chest, watching him warily. What do you want me to do? Even though I owe you money, I'm a respectable high school student. I would never do anything illegal or immoral. What are you thinking? Loe shot her an exasperated look, pointing at the now empty strawberry parfait cup on the table. What I mean is, since you have no money, you can make me a bento box. A bento box? That's right. Starting tomorrow, bring me a homemade bento box every lunchtime. Loe held up one finger. Of course, I get to set the price for the bento. I will decide how much of your debt is deducted based on the taste, presentation, and richness of the ingredients. If it tastes too bad, you'll have money deducted, you know. Just making bento boxes. Naomi Anna breathed a sigh of relief, then patted her flat chest confidently. That's no problem. Although my studies aren't great, I'm very confident in my cooking skills. Just wait until you're completely surprised. Then it's settled. Loe nodded in satisfaction. Only this way could he keep this simple JK firmly in the palm of his hand. Bringing lunch every day meant daily opportunities for contact, which meant the progress bar for that exclusive mission could advance steadily. As for whether he would be called despicable. Hey, this is the world of adults, Miss Naomi. Night fell. The neon lights on the streets began to flicker, adorning the entire city in a dazzling, bizarre spectacle. In front of the agreed-upon karaoke building, Loe, Arturia, and Naomi Anna, who had changed into casual clothes and made a special effort to dress up, met up. It was worth mentioning that to match this slightly more formal social occasion, Artoria had specially put on a black lady's pantsuit. This suit was specially procured by Loie. After all, to go to such a place, Saber couldn't still be wearing her very youthful casual attire. Moreover, this capable outfit, combined with her noble temperament, resulted in an explosive rate of turning heads. Truly worthy of being the king of knights, he thought with emotion. Let's go. Let's go meet your childhood friend. Loie adjusted his collar and led the two of them into the elevator. The moment the private room door was pushed open, a wave of sickeningly sweet love song duets washed over them. The lighting in the room was dim, and old, worn-out music videos played on the large screen. On the sofa, a man and a woman were holding microphones, gazing deeply at each other, as if the entire world consisted only of the two of them. The boy was quite handsome, possessing the typical face of a male protagonist from a Japanese light novel. The girl was a shocking pink-haired type, currently nestled in the boy's arms. It was Hakamada Susuke and Himegumi Karen. Hearing the door open, the two stopped singing and turned around. When their gazes landed on the three people entering, the previously relaxed atmosphere instantly solidified. Especially Hakamada Susuke. His sight first fell on Naomi Anna, then was quickly drawn to the tall, handsome man beside her, and finally was stunned by the cold and beautiful blonde woman wearing a suit. What was this situation? Didn't Anna say she was coming alone? Susuke, Karen. Naomi Anna took a deep breath. Although she was still a bit nervous, looking at Loie standing beside her gave her a little more confidence. She walked forward, trying hard to make her voice sound more natural. Sorry, we're a little late. We were waiting for them, so it took some time. Anna, who are these two? Himegumi Karen blinked her big eyes and asked curiously. Let me introduce them. Naomi Anna turned around, pointed at Loie, and a shy blush crept onto her face. According to the previous script, she should have said, "This is my boyfriend right now. This is my boyf. I am Loie." However, before the crucial word could escape her lips, Loie suddenly took a step forward, naturally interrupting her. He wore a gentle and appropriate smile, and his composed aura instantly took control of the entire scene. As for the relationship, Loie glanced at the stunned Naomi Anna beside him, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. He spoke in a tone that was slightly teasing yet incredibly doting. Miss Naomi here is currently enthusiastically pursuing me. Although I haven't officially agreed yet, seeing how hard she's trying, I accompanied her to meet her friends. Three gasps of different pitches echoed in the room. Hakamada Susuke and Himegumi Karen were shocked, while Naomi Anna was simply bewildered. The script wasn't written like this. What happened to pretending to be a boyfriend? How did it become me chasing you? Naomi Anna stared wide-eyed at Loie, just about to retort, when she felt Loie's hand gently rest on her shoulder. It was a hint. If she didn't go along with what he said, all her previous efforts would be wasted, and she would look even more pitiful. The status difference between someone who immediately found a fake boyfriend after being dumped and someone who is pursuing an ultra-high-quality man was huge, wasn't it? Realizing this, Naomi Anna gritted her teeth and nodded stiffly. Why, yes. She lowered her head, feigning the appearance of a shy young girl. I am currently pursuing Mr. Loie. It's because Mr. Loie is simply too outstanding that I don't want to miss the chance. After saying those insincere words, Naomi Anna felt her face burning. So that's how it is. Himegumi Karen let out a cry of pleasant surprise. I knew it. Anna is so cute, she's bound to meet someone better. Mr. Loie really looks very handsome. Meanwhile, Hakamada Susuke's expression became somewhat subtle. It felt as if a toy he always thought was sitting on the shelf, unwanted by anyone, had suddenly been taken away by someone who looked richer and had better taste than him. Even though he had already chosen Karen, and even though he didn't have those kinds of feelings for Anna, he subconsciously always believed that Anna liked him and was his childhood friend. This kind of trashy male mindset, even if I don't choose you, you should wait for me right where you are, made him extremely uncomfortable at that moment. Especially when he saw Loi's flawless face and the composure that seemed to control everything, an emotion called jealousy began to sprout. I haven't finished the introductions yet. Loi seemed completely oblivious to Hakamada Susuke's constipated expression and turned to look at Artoria beside him. This is Artoria. Loi's voice carried a hint of pride. She is my knight, and also my bodyguard. She accompanied us here today specially. Knight? Bodyguard? What kind of trope was that these days? Chapter 16, The Two Fleeing. Hakamada Susuke and Himegumi Karen looked towards the silent Artoria. Artoria nodded expressionlessly at the two of them, her pair of emerald eyes showing no emotional fluctuation, as cold as an iceberg. This aloof attitude only added to her mysterious and high-class aura. So amazing. Himegumi Karen muttered to herself. The main stage, which originally belonged to the two of them, was instantly taken over by the trio that had suddenly barged in. The atmosphere in the private room became somewhat bizarre. Loi was quite satisfied with this effect. He walked to the center of the sofa, sat down grandly, and then patted the seat next to him, signaling Naomi Anna to sit. All right, stop standing around. Loi looked at the still somewhat reserved group and displayed a brilliant smile. That smile was exceptionally dazzling under the dim lighting, as if it possessed an inherent holy light effect. It was the full output of his 10 charm stat. Since we're here to sing, let's get started. Loi turned his gaze to Naomi Anna, his eyes so gentle they seemed capable of dripping water. I really want to hear what kind of singing voice Miss Naomi, who is currently pursuing me, possesses. At this moment, the smile on Loi's face was like the hope of tomorrow, or perhaps a kind of fatal poison. Even knowing it was an act, even knowing this guy had a terrible personality, in that instant, Naomi Anna still felt her heart skip a beat. Ua? She hurriedly lowered her head, tightly clutching the hem of her skirt with both hands, her ears burning frighteningly hot. This man is truly breaking the rules. The air in the private room seemed to freeze. The sweet space that should have been for the couple Hakamada Susuke and Himegumi Karen to show off their affection had now turned into a bizarre multidimensional observation room due to the forceful intrusion of Loi and Artoria. On one side were the original protagonist group, holding microphones but sporting stiff expressions and wandering eyes. On the other side was the takeover group, sitting casually, exuding full presence, and even leisurely sipping complimentary lemon water. As for Naomi Anna, trapped in the middle, she wished she could bury her head in the plate of French fries and pretend to be a carbon-based life form whose only purpose was to eat. Awkward? Indeed, it was very awkward. But Loi didn't care in the slightest. One could even say he thoroughly enjoyed this awkwardness. He slightly narrowed his eyes, his gaze sweeping over Hakamada Susuke and Himegumi Karen. Honestly, he couldn't comprehend the thought process of these two. Since they had already established a romantic relationship and entered their own world, why did they still invite Naomi Anna out? Was it to display superiority? Or for the sake of a hypocritical declaration like, even though we're dating, we're still good friends? Or perhaps, was it simply due to dullness and malice? Seeing Naomi Anna shrinking back, Loi couldn't help but sneer internally. Whether intentional or unintentional, this kind of behavior was, in a sense, more nauseating than a direct slap in the face. It was like inviting someone who hadn't eaten for 3 days to a meal, only to make them watch you eat a full banquet while asking them to hand you napkins to wipe your mouth. This wasn't just humiliation, it was grinding a person's dignity into the dirt. Although watching old eight get snubbed was somewhat amusing, it didn't mean Loi could tolerate this kind of low-level face-slapping behavior. Since they wanted to play, he would play a big game with them. What? Not singing anymore? Loi set down the lemon water in his hand, breaking the silence. He stood up, his long fingers lightly gripping the slightly greasy microphone, but in his hands, it didn't look like cheap KTV equipment, but rather the baton of the Vienna Golden Hall. Since Miss Yanaomi recommended me so highly, I shall disgrace myself with a performance. At this moment, Lowy stopped holding back. His full 10 charm attribute was unleashed without reservation. He didn't choose a particularly difficult song, just a very ordinary pop love song. But when the first note flowed from his throat, the atmosphere in the entire room changed. It wasn't just technical perfection, it was an emotional resonance. Deep, magnetic, imbued with a profound affection that seemed capable of seeing through people's hearts. The light hit his profile, outlining a perfect jawline. At this moment, Lowy was like the sole light source in the room, the center of the world, a black hole that all gazes could not escape. Artoria sat quietly in the corner. Although she didn't understand modern music, as a sovereign, she could feel the innate confidence and commanding presence radiating from Lowy, causing her to slightly nod. Yanaomi Anna dropped her French fries. She stared blankly at the figure in front of the screen, her heart uncontrollably pounding. Even though she knew it was an act, even though she knew he was a wicked-tempered creditor, in this instant. He was truly so handsome. In contrast, Hakamada Susuke and Himegumi Karen on the other side displayed a complex array of expressions. It was a mixture of shock, self-consciousness, and deep unease. Especially Hakamada Susuke. As the original male lead, he currently felt like a clumsy clown, being crushed in every aspect, looks, temperament, and singing ability. His pride in his fulfilling life seemed pale and powerless in front of Lowy, who appeared like a perfect boyfriend descending from the heavens. The song ended. The private room fell into a deathly silence. It wasn't until a few seconds later that scattered applause broke out. You sang wonderfully, Mr. Lowy." Himegumi Karen forced a smile, but it clearly conveyed an urge to escape. "Yes. I didn't expect Anna to find someone this amazing." Hakamada Susuke's voice was somewhat dry. He glanced at Yanaomi Anna, whose face was flushed red while looking at Lowy, and the sour feeling in his heart intensified. He couldn't stay any longer. It's getting late. Karen and I have cram school early tomorrow, so we'll be leaving now." It was a clumsy excuse, but no one called it out. "Is that so? That's a shame." Lowy put down the microphone, wearing that socially acceptable smile that was impossible to find fault with. Safe travels. The two practically fled in disarray. As the private room door slammed shut with a bang, the oppressive and awkward atmosphere finally dissipated. Yanaomi Anna deflated like a punctured ball, collapsing onto the sofa and letting out a long breath. But quickly, an inexplicable emotion surged into her heart. She stood up somewhat dissatisfied, walked in front of Lowy, and was just about to question him if he had overdone the act just now, scaring everyone away. However, Lowy spoke first. He looked down at the blue-haired loser girl, his eyes devoid of the previous gentleness, replaced instead by a near-cruel pity. "Yanaomi, you truly are pitiful." Chapter 17 The Cursed Spirit at School. "Who?" Yanaomi Anna froze, the line she had prepared stuck in her throat. "What are you talking about? How am I pathetic? Still not pathetic enough?" Lowy pointed to the spot where the two had just been sitting, his tone as calm as if stating an objective truth. "Why do you think they asked you to come? To reminisce? Or because they genuinely needed an audience?" "Neither." Lowy shook his head. "This is deliberately rubbing it in your face, young lady." "Rubbing it in?" Yanaomi Anna seemed to hear the term for the first time. "Exactly. Although they might subconsciously feel they mean no harm, that is the logic of their actions. They display the happy aspects of their lives in front of a defeated failure, purely to gain some kind of psychological superiority and closure." Lowy walked up to her, looking directly into her eyes, every word a stab to the heart. "If we hadn't come today, what would have happened? You would have sat there like an idiot, watching them sing a duet with deep affection, listening to them call each other by pet names. Your heart might have been bleeding, you might have wanted to cry, but you would have had to maintain a proper smile on your face, and even applaud them when the song ended, offering your cheap blessings. You wouldn't just have to be a loser, you'd have to be an understanding loser who doesn't spoil the mood. That is the script they arranged for you. This was even intentional on their part. Although not explicitly stated, that arrogance of, "See? Even though I chose someone else, you still can't leave me," was practically overflowing. Poor loser. The last 5 words struck Naomi Anna's fragile self-esteem like a heavy hammer. I am not a loser. Naomi Anna suddenly lifted her head, her eyes instantly turning red, and she retorted loudly, I just haven't met the right person yet. Sukuna and I are childhood friends, our feelings. As she spoke, her voice grew softer, and her confidence waned. Because she knew Loie was right. If she had come alone tonight, it would absolutely have been an execution. Watching Naomi Anna look wronged, tears welling up, Loie didn't press the attack. Instead, he smiled and gave her his final piece of advice. First, stop thinking about winning back Hakamada Susuke. He patted the girl's shoulder, his tone softening slightly, yet becoming even more cruel. Face reality, Anna. That is pure love. Something like pure love cannot tolerate a single grain of sand, let alone a so-called childhood friend like you. Your existence, besides proving you are a pitiful loser, has no meaning. At least in this story, you've already exited the stage. Consider this my final warning to you. After saying this, Loie didn't look at her again. He turned and waved toward Artoria, who had been waiting quietly. Let's go, Leah. Our nightlife is just beginning. Naomi Anna stood frozen in place. Loie's words echoed in the private room, every syllable acting like a scalpel, precisely dissecting the reality she had been evading. She lowered her head, looking at her own toes. This was reality. No reversal, no miracle. The childhood friend ultimately lost to the unexpected arrival, companionship could not be exchanged for love. I really am a pitiful loser? The girl's murmur faded into the empty private room, but no one answered anymore. Leaving the karaoke box filled with the sour stench of youth and the cries of losers, Loie and Artoria's atmosphere instantly shifted. The location for Mission 4 was an abandoned high school on the edge of the city. The old campus of San's third high school. It was already cordoned off with yellow caution tape, surrounded by overgrown weeds, with only a few dim streetlights swaying in the night breeze, emitting a faint buzzing sound. As soon as he approached, Loie sensed a deeply uncomfortable aura. It was the scent of curses. Thick, cold, like the sludge in a sewer. Master, the aura here is nauseating. Artoria frowned. As a heroic spirit, her perception of such negative energy was far sharper than Loie's. There are many of them. Loie glanced at the prompt on the mission panel. Looks like this place is a cursed spirit nest. Are you ready? Loie asked. Anytime. Artoria nodded. The next second, blue magical light bloomed around her. Her neat black suit vanished in a flash of light, replaced by the silver-blue light armor inscribed with magical patterns, and the blue battle skirt that fluttered in the wind. An invisible wind gathered at this moment. Although the sword of promised victory was invisible, the sharpness that sliced the air made the surrounding weeds tremble. Go! Loie found a relatively safe blind spot to hide. This wasn't cowardice. After all, being a mage, standing on the front lines to take hits was the job of a warrior. Yes! Artoria let out a low cry, her figure shooting into the shadows of the abandoned schoolhouse like an arrow loosed from a bow. Roar! Inhuman roars echoed from the darkness. Immediately following were the muffled sounds of blades slicing through flesh, and the booming roar of magical energy erupting. Even when facing these creatures named cursed spirits that he had never seen before, the King of Night's sword remained incomparably sharp. The invisible blade traced deadly arcs through the air. The twisted, foul-smelling cursed spirits were easily shattered before her like clay chickens and pottery dogs. Loie leaned against the parallel bars by the sports field, leisurely watching this one-sided slaughter. As expected of Saber, such high efficiency, he praised, while mentally calculating the mission completion progress. However, just as he was about to pull out a lollipop from his pocket to celebrate, a sudden voice sounded next to his ear without any warning. That swordsmanship is amazing. It was a young man's voice. Flippant, casual, carrying a languid air of nonchalance, as natural as if he were browsing a convenience store. Loie's pupils contracted sharply. Someone approached. When? He whipped his head around. On the parallel bar right beside him, a figure had appeared at some unknown time. It was a tall man. He was wearing the black uniform of jiu-jitsu high, and his snow-white hair was especially conspicuous in the night. The most striking feature was the black blindfold covering half his face, revealing only his prominent nose bridge and the corner of his mouth, which always held a playful smirk. At this moment, the man was tilting his head like a curious baby, watching Artoria slaughtering enemies in the distance, even holding a bag of freshly bought kikufuku. Seemingly sensing Loie's gaze, the man turned his head. Even through the blindfold, Loie could feel the probing look. He raised one hand, speaking cheerfully as if greeting an old friend. Yo, good evening, kiddo. Making such a huge commotion in a school this late at night, it'll be a real headache if the police uncles catch us, you know. Gojo Satoru. The ceiling of Jiu-Jitsu Kaisen. The modern strongest Jiu-Jitsu sorcerer. Loie watched the unexpectedly appearing irreverent white-haired man, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. Chapter 18 Gojo Satori. The night wind was cool, carrying a faint scent of rust and old dust, blowing across the field of this abandoned high school. Below, the golden sword light still crisscrossed the darkness, each swing accompanied by the shrill wails of dissipating cursed spirits. That was the battlefield belonging to the King of Knights. But beside the parallel bars above, the atmosphere was exceptionally strange and leisurely. Loie looked at the white-haired, blindfolded man before him, who showed no sense of intrusion, as if he were there for a late-night picnic. Without any panic of being caught, Loie spoke in a calm tone, as if greeting an old acquaintance. Mr. Gojo, since you are here, aren't you going down to clean up these filthy things? For you, that should only take a snap of your fingers, right? Hearing Loie directly speak his name, the eyebrows hidden beneath Gojo Satoru's blindfold lifted slightly. But he didn't show much surprise. After all, he was Gojo Satoru. He was the head of the Gojo family of the Big Three families, a genius possessing the Rakugan and limitless cursed technique, and recognized the strongest in the jiu-jitsu world. In this circle, people who didn't know him were the rare ones, right? Moreover, this youth before him, although possessing no cursed energy, clearly wasn't an ordinary person who had stumbled into the wrong place, given his composed demeanor. Oh dear, I've been recognized. Gojo Satoru took a bite of the kikufuku in his hand, his cheeks puffed out, and he mumbled indistinctly, but the one downstairs going on a rampage, that's your companion, right? Since she's having such a good time fighting, if I, a mere passerby, suddenly interfere, I might be disliked, you know. Saying that, he swallowed the sweet treat in his mouth and leaned slightly forward. Even through the black blindfold, Loie could feel the gaze named Azure Eye scanning him. It's you, young man. Gojo Satoru's tone carried a hint of curiosity. You clearly have no cursed energy, yet you can stand here so calmly. Why aren't you going down to help? Letting a girl charge ahead alone is not the behavior a gentleman should exhibit. Gentlemanly conduct. Loie shrugged, turned sideways, and looked at the silver-blue figure dancing among the monsters below, a smile curving his lips. Everyone has their own specialty. He extended a finger to point at his own head, then pointed below. You can think of me as the command position, or perhaps, the master. Leah is my servant, which means she is my sword. Although I don't participate in close combat myself, all the magical power she needs for battle is supplied entirely by me. Having said that, Loie turned to look at Gojo Satoru. This explanation, Mr. Gojo, as a jiu-jitsu sorcerer, you should be able to understand, right? It's a bit like a Shikigami user, but our bond is much deeper than that. Supplying magic. Similar to constructing a connection channel. Gojo Satoru stroked his chin. His 6 eyes had long seen through the faint yet uniquely characterized energy flow within Loie. Indeed, an invisible thread connected him to the golden-haired girl downstairs. I see, a special cursed technique system. Gojo Satoru nodded thoughtfully, then immediately reverted to his usual playful smile. This is why I say that today's youth is terrifying. But? He shifted his tone, his words carrying a probing quality. Are you really that confident standing here? Although your companion is strong, there are quite a few cursed spirits downstairs. If she messes up, you, as the power bank, will be instantly torn to shreds. This was a test. A test of trust, of courage. Facing the oppressive aura of the strongest jiu-jitsu sorcerer, Loie didn't even blink. He looked at Artoria below, his eyes showing no worry, only an inherent calmness. Mess up. Loie shook his head and laughed, as if he had heard a joke. That kind of thing doesn't exist. Leah is my most trusted companion, and the most excellent knight. As long as I stand here, as long as my magical power isn't depleted, she will absolutely never be defeated. This is the contract between us. Seeing the confident smile on the youth's face, Gojo Satoru was momentarily stunned. Then, he laughed. Hava hava. Not bad, not bad. Gojo Satoru laughed heartily, even clapping his hands. I love this kind of confident look. Young people should be like this. I hate that timid, rotten orange flavor the most. After laughing, Gojo Satoru seemed to remember something and suddenly leaned close to Loie, his face, so handsome it provoked public outrage, nearly touching Loie's nose. Hey, young man. Since you have such talent, why not consider developing in a different environment? Gojo Satoru extended a finger, pointing to the non-existent badge on his chest, and whispered like a devil. How about joining Jiu-Jitsu High? That's the Tokyo Metropolitan Curse Technical College. Although the name sounds like some strange religious school, our benefits are quite good. Room and board provided, and you get guidance from a super incomparably handsome great teacher like me. How about it? Are you tempted? Hearing this invitation, Loie's heart stirred slightly. Jiu-Jitsu High? This was indeed the expected development. After all, in this world, contacting Gojo Satoru and entering Jiu-Jitsu High was almost the fastest way to access the core power system of this world. And an infamous meme from his previous life couldn't help but surface in Loie's mind. If he joined Jiu-Jitsu High, would he have a chance to face the King of Curses from 1,000 years ago in the future? At that time, if someone asked him, will you lose? Could he also put his hands in his pockets and say, I will win? Although the ending was a bit of a dark joke, it had to be admitted that this kind of development, brimming with death flags, held a fatal attraction for Loie. Moreover, he now had the player panel by his side, and Artoria Pendragon as his bodyguard. Even if Sukuna himself showed up, as long as he wasn't in his complete form, he might be worth engaging. Having figured this out, the smile on Loie's face became even brighter. Sounds very interesting. Loie looked at Gojo Satoru and gave an affirmative reply. Since it's an invitation from the strongest jiu-jitsu sorcerer, what reason do I have to refuse? Of course, why not? Bing tilde go. Gojo Satoru snapped his fingers, a look of satisfaction on his face. That's more like it. Compared to those stuffy old men, it's a straightforward personality like yours that suits my taste better. Welcome to the crazy world of jiu-jitsu sorcerers, young man. Just as the two reached a verbal agreement and the atmosphere was harmonious, Loie's gaze drifted unconsciously toward the paper bag Gojo Satoru was carrying. From it emanated a sweet and alluring fragrance. It was the Sendai specialty, Kikufuku. Specifically, the edamame whipped cream flavor. P.S. The previous romance simulation novel was banned, so revival isn't possible, but starting a new one is. I'll save up some drafts, the style will be similar, just less harem-focused. Chapter 19, Enrollment at Jiu-Jitsu High. Noticing Loi's fixed gaze, Gojo Satoru, who had just been acting like a hearty mentor, instantly changed his expression. Slap! With incredibly fast speed, he hid the bag in his hand behind his back, even cautiously taking half a step back, his possessive posture resembling a big white cat guarding its dried fish. Hey! Kid, although I think highly of you, this is absolutely out of the question. Gojo Satoru looked serious as he refused, as if Loi was trying to steal the nation's nuclear launch button instead of a dessert. This is the limited edition Kikufuku I waited in line for ages to buy. This one only, no negotiation. Is this how you treat a new student? Loi raised an eyebrow, deciding to tease the strongest a little. He spoke with a straight face and sincere tone, Mr. Gojo, I'm basically your prospective student now, right? As a welcome gift, isn't it a teacher's duty to treat a student to a dessert? Besides, my name is Loi, and I'll be your star pupil from now on. Can't you spare one Kikufuku? The address, Mr. Gojo, came out extremely naturally, carrying a hint of righteous justification. Gojo Satoru blinked. He had to admit, hearing the word teacher felt quite pleasant. But he glanced at the bag behind him, then back at Loi, and ultimately held firm to the bottom line of a dessert enthusiast. I'm happy you called me teacher. Gojo Satoru hesitated for 2 seconds, then shook his head, waving a finger. But absolutely not. This is a matter of principle. However, he paused, and the playful, cynical smile returned to his face. He patted Loi's shoulder. Since you called me teacher, I will definitely look out for you from now on. Don't worry, as long as I'm here, even a special grade cursed spirit is no big deal. As for the Kikufuku, when you can actually hit me once, I'll treat you until you're sick of it. Stingy, Loi pouted. This is an adult's conviction. Gojo Satoru argued illogically. Just as the two were bickering over a dessert like elementary schoolers, the sounds of battle below had completely subsided. The nauseating cursed spirit aura that had permeated the air had now completely dissipated. A light figure leaped out of the darkness, and with a few agile steps, she landed lightly on the concrete platform beside Loi. Accompanied by a faint glimmer of magic, the silver-blue armor vanished. Artoria had reverted to her usual appearance, a sleek, black-fitted suit, capable and elegant. Aside from slightly quickened breathing, she wasn't even stained with a single drop of blood. Master. Artoria quickly walked up to Loi, bowed slightly, and reported with a solemn expression. I have fulfilled my duty. All the monsters below have been completely eliminated, with no stragglers. Her voice was cool and firm, carrying a reassuring power. You worked hard. Loi looked at the night girl before him, his gaze softening. Welcome back, my knight. Simple greetings, yet they conveyed the unique tacit understanding between them. Artoria nodded, then her emerald green eyes instantly sharpened, looking warily at the strange white-haired man standing next to Loi. A warrior's intuition told her that this man was extremely dangerous. Even more dangerous than all the enemies she had encountered before combined. Don't be nervous, Leah. Loi patted Artoria's shoulder, signaling her to relax, then smiled and introduced her. This is Mr. Gojo Satoru. How should I put it? He's sort of my teacher. He just invited me to join a school specifically for dealing with these monsters. Teacher? Artoria paused, sizing up the blindfolded man who didn't look like a proper person at all, feeling somewhat confused. But since he was the master's choice, she naturally wouldn't argue, merely nodding politely. What do you mean sort of? Gojo Satoru, standing nearby, was displeased. He crossed his arms, feigning dissatisfaction, and loudly protested, I am Gojo Satoru. Being my student is a blessing earned over several lifetimes. Take out those words sort of. I am your teacher. Seeing Gojo Satoru's childish demeanor, Loi couldn't help but laugh. Even the strongest was essentially a grown man who never grew up. Oh. Loey blinked, suddenly putting on an innocent expression, spreading his hands and saying, "But Mr. Gojo, although I verbally agreed, I haven't completed the enrollment procedures yet. I don't even have student status. Legally speaking, I'm not yet a student at Jiu-Jitsu High, so I'm naturally not yet your student either. Don't read too much into it." At this, Loey deliberately drew out his tone, "So, that's teacher, just now was merely a polite address, don't get the wrong idea." "Who?" Gojo Satoru froze. He looked at Loey's half-smiling face and suddenly realized he might have been tricked by this seemingly honest boy. "Damn it!" Gojo Satoru exaggeratedly took a step back, clutching his chest with one hand and pointing a trembling finger at Loey, his tone filled with indignation. "You used that kind of logic to shut me up. Young people nowadays are just too unlovable. I got talked back to." Although he said that, the corner of his mouth visible outside his blindfold curved into an even more unrestrained arc. Interesting. Truly interesting. In the suburbs of Tokyo, nestled among the mountains, Tokyo Metropolitan Curse Technical High School, this complex of buildings imbued with religious character and classical charm, stood quietly deep within the dense forest. To ordinary people, this was a mysterious place that couldn't be found on any map. The enrollment procedures went unusually smoothly. After all, with the strongest, Gojo Satoru, vouching for him, and Principal Yaga, upon seeing Artoria demonstrate Wind King Barrier, while surprised by this power outside the cursed energy system, he tacitly accepted the existence of this special Shikigami. As for Fushiguro Megumi, the cool guy who always sported an unapproachable sea urchin-like hairstyle, Loey didn't bother him much. It seemed there were still a few days before the plot point where the pink-haired Itadori Yuji swallowed a finger began. These few days were enough for Loey to do many things. Noon, 3 days later. A highly rated Western restaurant in downtown Tokyo. Even after joining Jiu-Jitsu High and receiving a salary, Loey hadn't changed his habit of taking Saber out to forage for food. After all, to maintain the Night King's combat strength, delicious food was indispensable strategic material. At the dining table, Artoria was elegantly cutting a thick-cut steak in front of her. The knife and fork in her hand seemed to transform into the most precise instruments. The size of every piece of beef she cut was astonishingly consistent. Loey sat opposite her, swirling a glass of ice water, watching the girl diligently eating, a trace of contemplation flashing in his eyes. Some questions had to be asked sooner or later. Some emotional knots had to be faced sooner or later. Chapter 20, Sukuna's Finger. Leah. Loey put down the cup in his hand, his tone becoming slightly more formal. "I've been busy settling in and handling missions these past few days, and there's one question I've wanted to ask you." Hearing the master's serious tone, Artoria stopped eating. She put down her knife and fork, picked up a napkin to wipe her mouth, sat up straight, and gazed calmly at Loey with her pair of emerald green eyes. "Please ask, Master." "If it is something I can answer, I will hide nothing. Why did you answer the Holy Grail summon?" Loey looked directly into her eyes and asked that core question, or rather, what is the wish you pinned on the Holy Grail? The air instantly grew heavy. The previously relaxed dining atmosphere vanished completely. Artoria's eyes flickered slightly, as if she had touched the deepest and most painful scar in her heart. She lowered her head, looking at the unfinished steak before her, and remained silent for a long time. Then, she raised her head, a complex expression mixing pain, regret, and determination appearing on her face. "I want to go back to the past." Her voice was soft, yet every word carried immense weight. "I want to return to the day of selection, before I pulled out the sword in the stone. If it were like that, I wouldn't have become king. I want to select a king anew. It was because of me that the Round Table collapsed, that Britain was destroyed. I don't understand human hearts. I was not a qualified king. If someone more outstanding, someone who understood people better, could have led everyone, perhaps that tragic ending wouldn't have happened. Everyone wouldn't have died." The young girl's voice trembled slightly. That was the despair known as self-negation. She negated her entire life, negated her achievements, and even wanted to erase her own existence in exchange for the future of that long-vanished kingdom. What a tragic, yet how childish, wish. Loie listened quietly without interrupting her. As a transmigrator familiar with the plot, he naturally knew how absurd this wish was. The destruction of Britain was the inevitable result of the fading of mystery, the torrent of the times, no matter who sat on the throne, that ending could not be changed. If it were truly changed, it wouldn't be called the main history, it would be called an alternate timeline, something destined to be pruned. But he did not speak these cruel truths. For the current Artoria, this wish was the sole driving force supporting her manifestation as a heroic spirit, and it was her method of atonement. To directly negate it would be no different from killing her a second time. I understand. Loie nodded, a gentle smile appearing on his face. He reached out across the dining table and lightly patted Artoria's hand. Since this is your wish, then as your master, I will help you. Whether it's going back to the past or finding a new possibility. As long as it is what you want to do, then go for it. I will always stand behind you. Even if it ultimately proves futile, at least during the process, I will accompany you. And Loie silently added in his mind, as long as I can raise you well and make you happier in this world, perhaps you can slowly accept that heavy past. Master. Artoria froze. She had expected Loie to mock her naivety or question her decision. After all, wanting to change history sounded like the ravings of a madman. But Loie did not. He chose to support her unconditionally. Even if the wish sounded so impossibly distant. Thank you, Master. Artoria's eyes became moist, but that was quickly replaced by a brilliant smile. It's truly wonderful to have met you. Although this Master's total magic power wasn't high, although he sometimes seemed a bit unserious, and even a little despicable, he was truly a very gentle person. It was infinitely better than encountering an extreme master who would stop at nothing for victory and even force a servant to do things against the code of chivalry. All right, eat up quickly. It won't taste good if it gets cold. Loie smiled and pointed at the steak. Yes. The King of Knights picked up her knife and fork again. This time, her movements were much lighter. After lunch, the two had just walked out of the dining room when they saw that familiar figure. Gojo Satoru was still wearing his iconic black blindfold, dressed in a black jiu-jitsu high uniform, leaning against a utility pole by the roadside like a loafer, holding a cup of milk tea. And standing beside him was the perpetually grumpy sea urchin-haired boy, Fushiguro Megumi. Are you the transfer student Gojo-sensei mentioned? Fushiguro Megumi glanced at Loie and Artoria. His tone was cold, but there was no malice, he simply nodded. I am Fushiguro Megumi. Loie. Artoria. After the brief self-introductions, Gojo Satoru immediately rushed over, wearing that infuriatingly punchable smile. Since everyone knows each other, let's get straight to the point. Gojo Satoru clapped his hands. Coincidentally, there's a special mission that I think is perfect as an entrance test for you newcomers. A mission? Loie raised an eyebrow. Just then, on his retina, the mission panel visible only to him popped up again. And this time, the golden exclamation mark was blatantly hovering above Gojo Satoru's head, shimmering with an alluring light. Trigger main storyline mission, The Awakening of Sukuna, Prologue. Mission description, one of the special grade cursed object, Ryman Sukuna's finger, is currently stored in the weather box at Sujisawa 3rd High School. However, this finger is restless and is about to trigger a series of chain reactions. Mission objective, travel to the school, eliminate the cursed spirits attracted by the finger, and retrieve Sukuna's finger. Mission reward, 300 Primo Gems. 300 Primo Gems. Loie's pupils constricted slightly. Added to the savings accumulated from doing daily missions these past few days, these 300 Primo Gems were the last straw that broke the camel's back. No, they were the final piece to complete a temple summon. He quickly brought up his status panel and glanced at it. Player, Loie. Age, 18. Stamina, 21. Strength, 25. Speed, 22. Spirit, 21. Magic Power, 710. Primo Gems, 1530. Skill. Although he hadn't farmed monsters these past few days, thanks to the self-torturous physical training and Saber's devilish swordsmanship guidance, his base stats had improved visibly. Especially his magic power value, which had risen from the initial 100 to 710 due to daily meditation and the rewards from the knowledge is power emission. But it wasn't enough. To truly establish himself in this world, to face the powerful enemies that were about to arrive, he needed more. And this one Tenpul's summon was the key. Chapter 21, The Vanished Finger. Are you coming or not? Gojo Satoru wiggled his fingers. Of course I'm coming. Loe nodded without hesitation, his gaze as determined as if he were about to rob a bank. A mission to protect world peace? Who else but me? For my 10 consecutive draws. Sukuna's finger, hand it over. Night fell. Sujisawa Third High School. Loe, Artoria, and Fushiguro Megumi stood in the empty schoolyard. The air here was permeated with a faint residue of cursed energy. Although it wasn't as strong as the abandoned school building last time, it carried a strange, oppressive feeling. This is the place. Fushiguro Megumi held his phone, comparing it with the mission details, and walked straight toward the weather box next to the athletic field. According to the intel, the special grade cursed object is stored right here. As he spoke, he opened the small door of the weather box. However, it was empty. Inside, besides some dust and a few dead insects, there was nothing at all. Fushiguro Megumi froze. What's wrong? Loe asked knowingly as he approached. Nothing. Fushiguro Megumi's brows were tightly knitted. It's empty inside. He immediately pulled out his phone and dialed Gojo Satoru's number. Hello? Teacher Gojo? Yes, the place you mentioned is empty. What? You said you clearly put it there? Could you have misremembered? Who? You think some small animal might have snatched it? That's a special grade cursed object. How could any small animal eat something like that? Listening to Gojo Satoru's unreliable explanation on the other end of the line, a vein throbbed on Fushiguro Megumi's forehead. After hanging up, he took a deep breath, turned to look at Loe. There's nothing we can do now, we can only search based on the residual cursed energy signature. That thing is extremely dangerous. If it's not recovered quickly, the consequences will be unimaginable. Then let's split up. Loe nodded and suggested, it'll be more efficient this way. The sooner we find it, the fewer people will die, and it'll be safer. Although he already knew the plot, that the finger should currently be in the hands of those two suicidal upperclassmen from the Occult Research Club, and was about to be picked up by that simple-minded idiot Itadori Yuji with his innate divine strength. He didn't plan to spoil it directly. After all, if this was just a simple item retrieval mission, getting 300 Primo Gems would be too easy. He had a feeling something would go wrong. Fine, let's split up. Fushiguro Megumi didn't suspect anything and nodded. I'll check the school building area. You two go toward the club building. If anyone finds anything, contact the other immediately. No problem. Loe gave an okay gesture. Watching Fushiguro Megumi hurry away, Loe turned around and beckoned to Artoria beside him. Let's go, Leah. We're going over there. The night was as black as ink, isolating the neon lights of Tokyo on the distant horizon. On the campus of Sujisawa Third High School, there was a deathly silence. Fushiguro Megumi's figure had long since disappeared into the depths of the dark school building, searching for a target that didn't exist there at all. Meanwhile, Loe led Artoria toward the direction of the school gate. Master. Artoria stopped, her emerald eyes filled with confusion. Although she didn't understand jiu-jitsu, she knew that since they accepted the mission, they should commit to completing it with all their effort. Aren't we going to search? That boy named Fushiguro Megumi looked very anxious. No need to search anymore. Lowy put his hands in his pockets, glanced up at the moon obscured by clouds in the night sky, and spoke with a tone as calm as if discussing tomorrow's weather. I already know where the item is. Moreover, it's not the right time yet. Not the right time. Artoria tilted her head, and the ahoge on her head swayed slightly in the night breeze. That's right. Lowy turned around, looking at the club building distant and hidden in the darkness, a meaningful smile curving his lips. Some things only reveal their value at a specific time and in a specific place. As for that Fushiguro Megumi, letting him run a few errands won't hurt. After all, it's his duty. Trust me, Leah. Lowy's gaze returned to the face of the young knight, his eyes conveying a sense of certainty. Artoria looked at Lowy. Although their time together wasn't long, this master always possessed an aura that made her feel stable. While he occasionally had a mischievous streak, his judgment in critical moments had never been wrong. Since master says so. Artoria nodded, asking no further questions, and silently followed Lowy's pace. I trust your judgment. Wherever you go, the sword in my hand will clear the path for you. Time flowed, and in the blink of an eye, it was the deep night of the next day. Sujisawa 3rd High School, same location, but the atmosphere in the air was even heavier than last night. Club building, 4th floor. In the activity room of the Occult Research Club, 2 flickering candles cast a dim, yellowish glow, projecting 2 furtive figures onto the mottled walls. Sasaki Sr. and Iguchi Sr. were gathered around an old desk, their expressions tense yet excited. Between them lay a small wooden box tightly wrapped in talisman papers. Hey, Iguchi, are you sure this is that supposed special grade cursed object? Sasaki swallowed, extending a slightly trembling hand toward the ceiling talisman. I don't know. But based on the rumors before, there should be something very powerful sealed inside, right? Iguchi pushed up his glasses. Although frightened, curiosity still took the upper hand. If we peel off this talisman, maybe we can finally see a real supernatural phenomenon. Then, let's peel it off. The fingers of the two pinched the aged talisman paper. Just as they were about to use force. If I were you, I wouldn't touch that thing. A faint voice sounded beside their ears without any warning. Wah! This sudden interruption was more terrifying than a ghost in this eerie environment. Sasaki and Iguchi screamed and huddled together, nearly flipping the desk over. They raised their heads in terror, only to see that in the previously empty activity room, 2 people had appeared at some unknown time. A black-haired youth wearing a jiu-jitsu high uniform was leaning against the window, fiddling with a lighter in his hand. Standing beside him was a golden-haired girl wearing a black suit and possessing an imposing demeanor. Who are you? When did you get in here? Iguchi was so scared his glasses were askew. Who I am is not important. Lowy shrugged and walked forward. His movement seemed casual, but every step carried an irresistible sense of pressure. Sasaki and Iguchi instinctively shrank back. Although it was sealed by a special cursed tool, Lowy could clearly sense the cursed energy contained within. This was Ryaman Sukuna's finger. The remnant limb of the King of Curses. Chapter 22, The S-Rank Gal and the Special Grade Cursed Spirit. Pinching Sukuna's finger, Lowy dangled it in front of his eyes. Although it looked unsightly, the cursed energy contained within this thing was astonishingly vast, truly like a highly concentrated bomb. Hey! That belongs to us! Sasaki, though scared, mustered the courage to shout. This thing is the real deal, it's extremely dangerous. Lowy glanced at them, his eyes holding a trace of pity. If you don't want to die, hurry home. Tonight, this place will turn into hell. What do you mean? Iguchi was about to press for more, but the next second, his voice caught in his throat. Crack! It was the sound of breaking glass. A suffocatingly strong stench of blood, accompanied by a beast-like growl, instantly filled the entire room. Be careful, master! Artoria's reaction was lightning fast. Almost the instant the sound occurred, she was already blocking in front of Lowy. Although she held no sword, the invisible Wind King barrier instantly unfolded, constructing an unbreakable barrier. Bang! A black shadow crashed through the window like a cannonball, violently striking the invisible wind wall. The immense impact caused the floor of the entire activity room to tremble, and desks, chairs, and benches were instantly sent flying by the air blast. The dust and smoke dispersed. A man wearing a purplish-red suit, his hair meticulously combed back, but whose eyes were filled with madness and brutality, was half crouching on the windowsill. He held a strange tool resembling pliers in his hand, wore a half-hockey mask on his face, and the exposed eye flickered with a horrifying red light. "A-or-A?" The man tilted his head, letting out a hoarse and unpleasant sound. "Blocked? What a hard turtle shell." He slowly straightened his body, rotated his neck, producing a grating sound of popping bones. Then, he extended one finger and forcefully bent it backward. Snap! The crisp sound of the bone breaking made one's scalp tingle. The man looked at Loey, who was protected behind Artoria, his mouth splitting into an exaggerated arc, revealing bone-white teeth. "I'll pull off your fingernails one by one. Yamada Yakumo." Codename, Gecko. S-rank Gowl. Loey frowned slightly as he looked at this intruder. Was this the trouble with the crossover world? Not only the cursed spirits from the original plot, but monsters like Gowls were also attracted by this finger. What an impolite guest, Loey sighed. However, before he could finish his complaint, a change occurred again. He? Only one low-class Gowl? It seems the old man has arrived at just the right time. An aged and gloomy voice came from the ceiling. Immediately after, the ceiling melted. Yes, melted. The originally hard concrete slab seemed to have turned into boiling magma, dripping onto the floor with a sizzling sound. An indescribably high temperature instantly swept through the entire room. A short cursed spirit with a head like a miniature volcano slowly descended from the melted opening. A special grade cursed spirit, Jogo. Hand over Sukuna's finger, human. Jogo's large single eye stared intently at the finger in Loey's hand, and the cursed energy radiating from his body caused the air to distort. The situation instantly became extremely dire. In front was an S-rank Gowl who enjoyed slaughter, and behind was a special grade cursed spirit capable of incinerating everything. And caught in the middle were Loey and Artoria, along with two ordinary students who were already scared stiff. "Master, please step back." Artoria's voice remained steady, but her expression was stretched to its absolute limit. Her hands were held in a loose grip, and the vague outline of the sword of promised victory was already manifesting in the wind. Facing two enemies of this caliber while needing to protect three burdens was a huge challenge, even for the King of Knights. "Trying to run?" Gecko laughed maniacally, and his Kagoon erupted violently from his back, whipping towards the group like two giant centipede tails, accompanied by a whistling wind. "Get out of the way, you trash!" Jogo was not to be outdone. With a casual wave, several winged fire insects shot out. These were fire gravel bugs that caused violent explosions upon contact. Boom! Boom! The sounds of explosions and collisions mixed together. Artoria was forced to parry Gecko's heavy strikes while simultaneously using a burst of cursed energy to disperse the fire bugs. "Go quickly!" Taking advantage of the opening Artoria created, Loey grabbed the still-dazed Sasaki and Iguchi and shoved them toward the doorway. Just then, urgent footsteps echoed from the hallway. "Senpai! Senpai!" Accompanied by an anxious shout, the pink-haired youth kicked open the dilapidated main door. Itadori Yuji. Closely following him was Fushiguro Megumi, who had summoned the divine dogs. What is this situation?" Fushiguro Megumi froze upon seeing the hellish scene inside the room, the burning floor, the distorted monsters, and a girl in a suit sword fighting intensely. This was 100 times worse than the worst-case scenario he had envisioned. "Stop spacing out. Take the people and retreat first." Loey shouted immediately upon seeing the two. The current situation was clear. Holding this finger was like holding a torch in the dark, attracting the hatred of all monsters. Gecko and Jogo clearly did not regard these kids as a threat. Their only target was the black-haired youth holding the finger. "Give me the finger!" Gecko roared, his Kagoon instantly swelling, bypassing Artoria's defense line, and stabbing directly toward Loi's heart. "That belongs to the old man." Jogo attacked simultaneously, magma erupting from the ground, sealing off all of Loi's retreat paths. Forced back several steps, Loi was cornered against the wall. The Sukuna's finger in his hand now felt unbearably hot. This thing was truly a disaster. "You want this?" Loi raised the finger in his hand and dangled it in front of the two monsters. Gecko and Jogo's movements momentarily paused, their greedy gazes focusing on the withered finger. "It's not impossible to give it to you." A wicked smile curved on Loi's lips. The next second, his figure flashed violently. It wasn't to escape or counterattack, but to charge directly toward Itadori Yuji, who had just entered and still looked bewildered. Before anyone could react to what Loi was about to do, he arrived in front of Yuji. "Open your mouth," Loi commanded in a low voice. "Who?" Yuji subconsciously opened his mouth. "What?" Before he could finish speaking, Loi, with lightning speed, tore off the cursed energy seal on the finger, and then... Phut! He violently stuffed the finger, which resembled embalming wax, down Yuji's throat. Chapter 23, Excalibur. Ua. Ua. Itadori's eyes widened. The sensation of having a foreign object forcibly inserted instantly made him gag. That thing. It was hard, dry, and carried a disgusting smell like soap mixed with an aged corpse. It was absolutely not something a human could eat. But it was too late to vomit. The finger seemed to have a life of its own, sliding down his esophagus and instantly being absorbed by his body. Dead silence filled the entire area. Even Gecko and Jogo were stunned. They never imagined that the guy who seemed to be the commander would directly feed the object they were fighting over to a passing pink-haired kid. There. That's that. Loi clapped his hands, as if he had just done something insignificant, and turned to face the two monsters who were already on the verge of a rage explosion. He spread his hands, wearing that infuriatingly mocking smile. The thing you wanted is gone. It was eaten. Now, can you get lost? Silence. A brief silence was followed by a volcanic eruption of fury. You bastard, how dare you toy with me? Gecko completely lost it. He hated being played with the most. The Kagoon on his body thrashed wildly, and his entire body charged forward like an out-of-control tank. Unforgivable, cut open that kid's stomach. Jogo also went berserk. The volcano on his head spewed thick smoke, and the terrifying high temperature instantly melted the surrounding walls. Facing the fatal blow from the two enraged special-grade monsters, Loi still stood in place, without any intention of dodging. He just quietly looked ahead, his eyes devoid of any fear. Because he didn't need to move. Leah. It didn't even require a verbal command. That instant exchange of glances was worth 1,000 words. Artoria felt her master's will, and she felt that unreserved trust. She took a deep breath and tightly gripped the invisible sword hilt. Wind King barrier was released. Golden radiance illuminated the dark activity room at that moment. It was not an earthly weapon, but a crystallization of fantasy forged by the planet, carrying the hopes of the people. Sacred, majestic, and impossible to look at directly. A massive torrent of magical energy surged into the sky, directly ripping off the roof of that floor. What is that? Fushiguro Megumi's eyes widened. The holy radiance was so bright he couldn't open them. Facing the charging Gecko and Jogo, Artoria raised the golden sword in her hand high. Her gaze was clear and resolute, and she softly uttered the name that echoed through legend. Excalibur! Boom! The golden stream of light, like a roaring dragon, instantly submerged everything in front of it with unparalleled might. The golden torrent pierced the night sky. It was not merely light and heat, but a pure flow of magical power, the holy sword of the stars capable of erasing the very concept of matter. When the dazzling light finally faded, the top floor of the eerie and terrifying club building had completely vanished. Only half a section of scorched red rebar stood lonely, pointing towards the starry sky, resembling a half-eaten donut. As for that arrogant and overbearing S-rank Gecko, not even ashes remained. The moment he made contact with the stream of light, his proud Kagoon, tough body, and twisted soul were instantly vaporized, completely returning to nothingness. Cough, 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 cough. A fit of violent coughing broke the dead silence. At the edge of the half-ruined wall, the formerly arrogant special-grade cursed spirit, Jogo, was now left with only half a body. There was a large hole in his magma head, and half of his shoulder along with his arm were gone. Instead of bleeding, dark red lava flowed from the wound, emitting a sizzling sound. Damn it, what kind of power was that? Jogo's single eye was filled with terror. As a cursed spirit born from the earth, he had a natural affinity for the powers of nature, but that light just now made him tremble from the depths of his soul. That wasn't a curse technique, nor was it a simple special ability, it was a mystery of a higher level. If he hadn't desperately deployed his half-finished domain to mitigate the damage at the last moment, he probably would have turned into air just like that gecko. Still not dead. Loey plopped down onto the ground covered in rubble, gasping for breath, his face as pale as paper. He felt as if he had been completely drained by hundreds of older sisters for 3 days and 3 nights. His internal magic circuits were so dry they even stung slightly. Although he was the master and his magic value had increased to 710, it was still too little for a top-tier heroic spirit like Artoria. That Excalibur just now, despite its grand display, hadn't even utilized 1/10 of Artoria's full strength. It could even be called that impoverished version of the Sword of Promised Victory. If he had sufficient magical power, that single strike wouldn't just flatten this floor, it would shave off the entire school and the mountain behind it, and Jogo would undoubtedly be dead. Looks like. I need to add a bit more. Loey rubbed his temples with a wry smile. Just as Artoria prepared to advance with her sword to deliver the finishing blow, the space behind Jogo suddenly twisted. A dark rift resembling a pelican's beak appeared out of thin air. It was a spatial technique belonging to some hidden manipulator. That won't do. Jogo is important combat strength. A light chuckle seemed to echo in the void. In the next moment, the heavily wounded Jogo was swallowed directly by the dark rift before he could utter any threats, instantly vanishing without a trace. He ran away. Artoria frowned slightly, lowering the invisible sword in her hand. She glanced back at the exhausted Loey, a hint of self-reproach flashing in her eyes. I apologize, Master. I failed to completely eliminate the enemy. No, that's not your fault. My mana pool is too shallow. Loey waved his hand, signaling her not to worry. However, the crisis did not end with the monster's retreat. A curse aura, more sinister and purer than Jogo's, suddenly erupted beside Loey. He he he. Ha 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 ha. Crazed laughter, carrying an air of absolute dominance, emanated from the pink-haired youth who had been gagging nearby. Itadori Yuji stopped vomiting. He slowly straightened up, hands in his pockets, his uniform strained by his surging muscles. On his face and the backs of his hands, black curse markings spread like living vines. Below his originally clear eyes, a second pair of crimson eyes cracked open. The King of Curses, Ryaman Sukuna, has manifested. This scene, it's not my era, but it has a unique flavor. Sukuna rotated his neck. All 4 eyes moved simultaneously, finally locking tightly onto Loey, who was sitting on the ground. Chapter 24, Sukuna awakens, then is suppressed. Even though he had just awakened, he clearly remembered that it was this and who dared to force his finger into this body as if stuffing garbage. This was blasphemy. Hey, brat. Sukuna's lips curved into a cruel smile, and his figure instantly vanished from where he stood. As a return gift for meeting you, I'll take your head first. Fast. Unimaginably fast. Even with the power of just 1 finger, even though this body was still very young, under the control of the King of Curses, the speed that erupted still surpassed the limits of humanity. That claw, imbued with cursed energy, aimed straight for Luo Wei's throat. Luo Wei didn't even blink. Because clang! The sound of clashing metal exploded. A slender yet powerful arm steadily blocked Sukuna's claw. Artoria stood in front of Luo Wei. Although her sword could no longer unleash its true name due to depleted magical energy, and even the Wind King barrier was struggling to maintain itself, revealing the true form of the golden sword, her gaze was still sharp as a blade. Intuition A. In the face of this skill, a simple speed ambush was meaningless. You want to touch my master? Artoria snorted coldly, flicked her wrist, and an exquisite swordsmanship instantly erupted. It wasn't a head-on clash relying on brute force, but rather utilizing shifts in center of gravity and joint techniques. What? Sukuna showed a hint of surprise. The next second, his entire body was flicked away by a subtle force, tumbling twice in the air before barely managing to land. Interesting woman. Sukuna narrowed his eyes, looking at the knight before him who, despite being empty of magical energy, possessed martial arts that had reached the pinnacle of mastery. Not a jiu-jitsu sorcerer, nor a cursed spirit. Are you that brat Shikigami? Artoria did not reply, merely adjusting her breathing, holding her sword with both hands, and adopting a perfect defensive posture. Although her magical energy was depleted, to deal with Sukuna who only possessed one finger, she could suppress him with swordsmanship alone. TCH, boring. Just as Sukuna was preparing to have some real fun, his movement suddenly froze. The hand that was originally reaching out to form a hand seal suddenly gripped his own neck uncontrollably. Go, back! Itadori Yuji's voice rang out again, filled with anger and resistance. The domineering aura that originally belonged to Sukuna began to recede like a tide. The cursed marks on his face were rapidly fading. Impossible! This brat can actually suppress me. For the first time, Sukuna's voice carried shock. This was a deadly poison. It was the finger of the King of Curses. What kind of structure did this kid's body have? Even jiu-jitsu sorcerers from 1,000 years ago couldn't achieve this level. Ah, so noisy! Get out of my body! Accompanied by Yuji's loud roar, the last scarlet compound I reluctantly closed. Itadori Yuji regained control of his body. He touched his face, then looked at his hands, completely bewildered. What was that just now? I suddenly felt like my body wasn't listening to me. Naturally so. Luo Wei watched this scene, letting out a sigh of relief internally. Although he knew the original plot, seeing Itadori suppress Sukuna as if nothing happened still felt absurd. However, this was a cage specially crafted by Kenjaku for Sukuna, so it was reasonable that it could hold him. Just then. Whoa! This is too exaggerated, isn't it? A frivolous voice came from the edge of the ruins. Everyone turned to look. They saw Gojo Satoru standing there at some unknown time. He was carrying a plastic bag, pushing up his blindfold, looking like a tourist visiting a scenic spot, clicking his tongue in amazement at the large hole blasted out by Excalibur. Who did this? The power of this strike, I'm afraid it's at the level of a grade 1 sorcerer. No, a special grade level. Gojo Satoru walked up to Luo Wei and Artoria. Although he was wearing a blindfold, Luo Wei could feel him sizing up Artoria. Well done, classmate Luo Wei. And this young lady knight. Gojo Satoru gave a thumbs up. Although teacher was a little late, it seems you handled it perfectly. It was just good luck. Luo Wei got up from the ground, dusting off his backside. If you had been 1 minute later, we really would have been beaten into dust. Gojo Satoru chuckled and didn't dwell on the topic. He turned around and walked toward the still stunned Itadori Yuji. The subsequent plot proceeded exactly as Luo Wei had predicted. Gojo Satoru became extremely interested in Itadori as a vessel. After some simple questioning and testing, he directly issued a hardcore 2-option invitation, execution or joining Jiu-Jitsu High. Seeing the plot moving onto the right track, Luo Wei didn't intend to remain a background fixture any longer. He glanced at his mission panel. Mission, Sukuna's Awakening, Prologue. Status, completed, destroyed via special means. Reward, 300 Primo Gems, issued. Seeing the glittering 300 Primo Gems deposited, Luo Wei's pale face, previously drained from magical exhaustion, instantly became much rosier. This was the joy of having Primo Gems. Teacher Gojo. Luo Wei walked forward and casually threw an arm around Itadori Yuji's neck, just like old buddies who had known each other for years. I've already completed the mission, okay. Luo Wei pointed at Itadori and said righteously, see? Sukuna's finger has been eaten by this kid. Isn't that a form of recovery? Anyway, the result is the finger is gone, and the cursed spirit is dealt with. My mission is successfully concluded, right? Itadori, who was being squeezed to the point of struggling for breath, couldn't help but complain when he heard this. Cough cough. Wait a minute. What do you mean eaten? You forcefully shoved it into my mouth, didn't you? That taste was truly disgusting. It was like eating a bar of soap-flavored candle. Hearing the accusation from the person involved, Fushiguro Megumi on the side also cast a look of disdain. Luo Wei's smooth-feeding action earlier had left him with a deep psychological shadow. Faced with the questioning, Luo Wei's expression remained unchanged, and his heart did not skip a beat. He released Itadori, straightened his collar, and said with an air of stern righteousness. Classmate Itadori, you have misunderstood my good intentions. Think about it, how critical was the situation back then? There was a Gaul in front and a special grade cursed spirit behind. If we didn't deal with the finger, they would have kept chasing us. Feeding it to you was, on one hand, to cut off the monster's obsession, and on the other, to use this method to lure the monsters closer so my saber could wipe them all out with one Excalibur blast. Having said that, Luo Wei patted Itadori's shoulder earnestly. This is called tactics. It's a necessary sacrifice. Look, everyone is alive now, isn't that the best ending? Itadori scratched his head. Although he felt something was off, what Luo Wei said seemed quite reasonable. Is that so? Then thank you. You're welcome. Luo Wei waved his hand generously. Chapter 25, Will Win. Artoria, standing to the side, quietly turned her head away, pretending to look at the scenery. Even for the righteous king of knights, her master's twisted logic at that moment felt utterly shameless. But, considering that her master was indeed trying to protect everyone, she could only sigh inwardly and tacitly accept this explanation. Ha 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 ha. Gojo Satoru burst into a fit of loud laughter, laughing so hard tears almost came out. Interesting. Truly interesting. He slapped Luo Wei's back. To be able to articulate such reckless behavior so elegantly, Luo Wei, you truly have the potential to become a jiu-jitsu sorcerer. I have high hopes for you. All right, since everything has been settled. Loei yawned, that deep sense of exhaustion surging back into his heart. The after effects of overdrawing his magical power were starting to show. He just wanted to find a bed and sleep for an entire day and night. As for the rest of the mess, that was an adult's problem. Teacher Gojo, the follow-up reports and this kid's enrollment procedures are up to you. After all, you're the teacher. Loei waved his hand, pulled Artoria's wrist, and walked toward the outside of the school without looking back. Leah and I are taking off now, I'm exhausted. Go back to sleep. Watching the two figures leave, Gojo Satoru stroked his chin. A smile still hung on his lips, but his eyes held a deeper meaning. A special energy system, a powerful knight servant, and this unfathomable personality. It looks like this year at Jiu-Jitsu High is going to be very lively. Gojo Satoru turned to look at the still stunned Itadori. All right, kid, let's go too. Time to welcome your new life, if the higher-ups haven't sentenced you to death by tomorrow. Who? Death sentence. Incidentally, the destruction of the school this time was officially defined as an explosion caused by a gas leak. The morning at Tokyo Metropolitan Curse Technical College always carried a refreshing air, completely different from the curse-laden atmosphere of the school itself. The thin mist in the mountains had not yet completely dispersed, and the birdsong was crisp and pleasant. For Itadori Yuji, this should have been the worst day of his life. After all, just last night, he had been declared guilty and sentenced to death. But unexpectedly, the pink-haired youth's mentality was astonishingly good. Perhaps remembering his grandfather's dying wish to die surrounded by the adoration of the masses, he felt that if his death could take the so-called king of curses with him, it seemed like a worthwhile trade. Of course, a certain delinquent teacher had no intention of letting that happen. "All they have to do is kill you? Those old oranges upstairs are still this rotten," were Gojo Satoru's exact words. Thus, after a negotiation that lacked any real tension, Itadori Yuji officially became a first-year student at Jiu-Jitsu High. On the training ground. Although it was called a training ground, it actually looked more like a private garden paved with expensive synthetic running tracks. Now then, let's start by testing your physical fitness. Gojo Satoru still wore his signature blindfold, holding a stopwatch in his hand. His Jiu-Jitsu High uniform was worn loosely, looking less like a dignified teacher and more like a senior leading a truancy effort. "Oh. Leave it to me." Itadori Yuji was doing warm-up exercises, his exaggerated muscle lines faintly visible beneath his sportswear. This guy's physical conditioning was practically a BUG. Without the enhancement of cursed energy, he could break world records barehanded. And on the other side of the field, Loie and Artoria had also arrived early. Compared to the energetic Itadori, Luo Wei appeared much more relaxed. He sat cross-legged on the grass, sensing the cursed energy flowing in the air. "Master, are you trying to convert energy?" Artoria stood guard quietly beside him, having keenly noticed the change in Luo Wei's aura. Tried a little bit." Loie opened his eyes, a sharp glint flashing in his pupils. For a player who possessed a system, the essence of power was universally transferable. In this Jujutsu Kaisen worldview, the air was filled with negative energy called cursed energy. In the Nasaverse worldview, it was ether and magic. Although the nature was different, on Luo Wei's status panel, they were uniformly quantified as magic power. This meant he could absorb both types of energy into his body through breathing techniques or meditation, then convert them into pure magic power via his body to supply Saber. The efficiency isn't as good as directly drinking a blue potion to restore mana, but it's better than nothing. Lois stood up and brushed the grass clippings off his pants. After adapting over the past few days, the magic power in his body had mostly recovered. Furthermore, due to continuous squeezing and recovery, his magic power limit seemed to have increased by another notch. As expected of a physique called Verth's answer. "Yo, classmate Luo Wei. Want to run a couple of laps too?" In the distance, Gojo Satoru saw Luo Wei standing up and waved enthusiastically. "Itadori just ran an astonishing time. You need to work harder, or the prestige of a senior will be lost." Loie smiled and walked over with Artoria. Itadori was currently leaning over, panting while supporting his knees, but his face was beaming with excitement. For this sports genius, just moving his body brought happiness. "Teacher Gojo." Loie didn't follow up on the running topic but walked up to Gojo Satoru, calmly gazing at the man renowned as the modern strongest. What's up? So serious, are you trying to treat your teacher to Kikufuku?" Gojo Satoru tilted his head. Loie looked at Gojo Satoru's unguarded smiling face and suddenly spoke. "Although it might be a bit early to say this now, I still want to give you a warning. Against Ryaman Sukuna at his peak, you basically cannot win." The air suddenly fell silent. Itadori, who had been stretching, froze, blinked, and looked at the two of them with a bewildered expression. Artoria also turned her head slightly. Although she didn't fully understand the world's power system yet, she could sense the immense power of the white-haired man before her. Her master actually said he couldn't win? Gojo Satoru's smile did not fade. He merely raised an eyebrow slightly, and his Rakugan hidden beneath the blindfold seemed to penetrate the fabric, analyzing Luo Wei's every move in that instant. Oh my, I've been underestimated. Gojo Satoru put his hands in his pockets, his tone still relaxed, as if discussing what to eat tonight. Ryman Sukuna is indeed strong. After all, he is the king of curses from 1,000 years ago. If he were to gather all 20 fingers and recover all his power. He paused there. Then, the famous scene occurred. Gojo Satoru tilted his head, a curve of absolute confidence on his lips, and said lightly. It would be a bit strenuous. Will you lose? Itadori couldn't help but ask. No. Gojo Satoru raised his thumb, pointed to himself, and stated decisively. I will win. Because I am the strongest. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Sally Fox audiobook.